Greetings, this is Foul & Hard, and over the last year, 2023, and this year, 2024, I have been playing every single Pokemon game. Every one. I burnt myself out June last year, and I have started up again January this year. I am currently right at the end of Pokemon Moon, and I do plan on playing Ultra Sun and Moon again. However, I still remember quite a bit of Ultra Sun and Moon. And it was kind of a mixed bag in comparison to Moon. Like, some things it did miles better, such as pacing. Other things it kind of fucked up a little bit, in my opinion, such as the story. Also, I missed the Pokepelago that was in Pokemon Sun and Moon original. It wasn't in the next game, and I really missed it. I really liked the Pokepelago, but I thought it was very useful. But yeah, so it's things like that. So I still remember it. So we're going to be going through all of these, and I'm going to try and give you a mix between objective fact and my opinion. So let's just say that there are games down here that I really do not like. I am going to give them credit where credit is due. I'm not going to say, oh, they're a big pile of shit, and put them right down at the bottom. I'm going to give them credit where credit is due. So I'm linking what I think is... I am mixing my own opinion with what I think is objective fact. So yeah, first of all, there are no games here that I haven't played. So we're going to change this to fuck you. Because if there is a game here that I generally feel like is an insult, in which they might be missing, no, it is there. If there is a game here that I think is a genuine insult, then I'm going to put it down there. And then S is going to be peak Pokemon. Like, these are the best games in the series, without question. If you're brand new to Pokemon, that is what you should play, because that is the best experience you're gonna get. The rest we'll figure out. We may move them up and down, we may alter this list, but that's how we're gonna go. So, first of all, the order of this goddamn list triggers the shit out of me. Why are we starting with Diamond and Pearl? We're gonna start with my first game, Pokemon Yellow. Here's the thing about Generation 1. Gen 1ers has become a meme for a reason, because Gen 1ers are fucking annoying. Was Gen 1 good? God, yes. It was. Gen 1 started a fucking revolution in nerd culture. Pokemania was a thing. Frigging religious types were freaked out because it was something that was distracting from God. Like Harry Potter and Dungeons and Dragons and everything else that's great in this world. So they attacked it and called it of the devil. Pokemania was huge. In fact, where is it? Way back here, I have these little things from way back when. You used to get them in packs of 3, and I was obsessed with them. These little things, let me put my friggin' webcam on. These little things are toys with mouse balls at the bottom of them. And look, I've actually kept these things really clean. These are many years old. I was a little kid when I got these, and look how clean they are. I've taken care of these goddamn things. Used to get them in packs of 3. Yeah, here's a Charmander. And the whole idea with them is you would roll them on the desk, and you would make them fight each other by rolling them together and tackling them. Think of it like Beyblade. Now, for those of you who are too young and don't know because you're used to the infrared era, mice, as in computer mice, used to have these fucking things underneath them. And that's how you rolled them. It didn't use infrared, it used this shit. And every so often, as you can see there, because it's literally the same as a mouse, you'd have to take these things out and give them a clean, because they'd get full of crap and the mouse would stop working. So every so often, you'd have to take these out of the mouse and give them a clean, and then put them back in. So yeah, I'm 33 years old and I'm sounding like an old man. I've got a big ass box of these things back here full of Gen 1 Pokemon. I got rid of a lot of my old Pokemon stuff, but I kept that because there's something about that that has always been special to me. But yeah, here we go. So Gen 1, I am not a Gen 1er. I love Pokemon as a whole, but there is something magical about Gen 1. There really is. There is something magical about Generation 1. Gen 1 and Gen 2 had a uniform style that was lost later on down the line. And a lot of people do miss that uniform style, because Generation 1 and 2 were it was like looking at wildlife pictures. The animals were posed, the Pokemon were posed in a lot of natural ways, or ways that really spoke to their character. It felt like an adventure. And back then as kids, there was really nothing like it. But it actually took me a while to get into Pokemon. I was really into the anime, but the games were too complicated for me. Little did I know I would later become an RPG player. But my first game in the series was Pokemon Yellow. And I got it after playing Pokemon Silver when on holiday with family friends. I was playing my friend's copy of Silver and was like, wow, this is really good. So started over and I got Pokemon Yellow. It was my first game. Fun fact, most people's favorite Pokemon tends to be their starter. I do not like Pikachu. Except Detective Pikachu. Pokemon Yellow is pretty fun. It's the closest one to the cartoon. You know, you can catch all the Pokemon Ash can catch. You can't catch all the Pokemon that was connected to Team Rocket, like Koffing and Ekans and things like that. It's fun. It's Gen 1, but more of the anime, and I really like it. That being said, when it comes down to playing the anime, or playing the Pokemon game, I'm gonna mute this phone because it keeps fucking honking at me. Somebody is desperately trying to get my attention. Let me fucking mute this thing for a little bit. Do not disturb. There we go. Otherwise, you're going to be honked at the entire time. Here's Gen 1. Gen 1 is better. Without question, Gen 1 is better. It's just... You're not stuck with Pikachu the entire time. You can actually have an electric type that isn't shit. You're not stuck with Pikachu. Admittedly, this formula would be done a lot better much later on. But this is, yeah, like Gen 1 is magical. Gen 1 is incredibly nostalgic. And Gen 1 and 2, I count them both together because they're both good for the same reasons. Gen 1 and 2 is, there's something special about them. And none of the other games in the series have the vibe of Gen 1 and 2. I don't think I can play old games quite as easily as these games. There's just something super simple, super pick up and play. They don't hold your hand as much as the later games. They don't talk at you consistently as much as the later games. And you're just on an adventure. And it's really fun. And I am sick of Generation 1 Pokemon at this point for the most part. Even though many of my favorites are still Gen 1. But I am sick of a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon at this point. But, especially fucking Charizard. But, there is something magical about them. I think it's very trendy to shit all over Gen 1 at this point as a kind of counter to the annoying Gen 1ers that act as if Gen 1 was the only good Pokemon game. A lot of the times these guys don't even mention Johto, and Johto was good for the exact same reason fucking Kanto was. But, yeah. So, again, we'll reorganize these as we go on, but for now, I think middle of the road kind of fits them, because... let's be honest, technologically and in a lot of ways, the Pokemon games are better now than they were. Even the games that a lot of people hate, like Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield, this may trigger people, but they're probably better than Gen 1. Just because there's more to them. There's a lot more to them. And you're not limited to just Gen 1 Pokemon. That being said, that might be different when we actually get to the list. I might prove myself to be lying later on down the line when it comes to those games, but we'll see. But there is something magical about Gen 1 and 2 that is just not replicated later on. Speaking of Gen 2, let's do that right away. Pokemon Gold and Silver is better than Gen 1. It just is. In fact, I would put this a little bit higher than Gen 1. Because... there's Gen 1 in it. There's Gen 1 in it. The only problem with Gold and Silver is Gold and Silver used to be the peak of Pokemon in terms of the community general opinion, because it contained Kanto as well. And this is something a lot of people have wanted again. People really, really want a region in which you visit another region. Now, I understand not doing all the regions because it wouldn't make sense. However, having connected regions, of which there are, would be kind of neat. Traveling over to a different region. In fact, we kind of got a little bit of taste of this in the last bit of DLC for Scarlet and Violet. You go to the Unova, you go to the Black and White continent, in the last bit of DLC. Now, it's nowhere recognizable. It's a university in the ocean in Unova, but it is Unova. So that is them hinting on the eventual Gen 5 remakes they'll make. God, I hope they're good. I'm really worried about them. But yeah, like, we do kind of do that, but it's not the same as it was in Gen 2. Generation 2 was better for one major reason. Gen 2 was a generation that was designed for you to get lost in. Gen 2, they thought, would be the last Pokemon entry. They thought, this is it now. This is the peak. We're gonna go downhill from here. This fad, it's gonna end here. That's it now. It's going down. We're gonna make the most of it. We're gonna give them the best game we could possibly get. So we're giving you Johto, we're giving you Kanto, we're giving you a bunch of daily stuff for you to log in and do every single day, or we're giving you weekly event things like the bug catching contest and so on and so forth. This is a game that you're going to be able to come back and play for many years to come and do a lot of little things. So we want to fill this cartridge with as much as we possibly can to give you guys the best experience you could possibly have as a last hurrah for Pokemon. Meanwhile, we're in Generation 9 in 2023. In 2025, we're going to get even more Pokemon. So they were wrong about that, but yeah, they legitimately thought that Gen 2, that was it. That's the end of the series. So they gave us the best game they possibly could. And it was really good. The major issue with Gen 2, however, is most of the really iconic and new typed amazing Pokemon you don't get in Johto. You get in Kanto post-game. So, Slugma, for example, a lot of people think is a Gen 3 Pokemon. It's not. It's a Gen 2 Pokemon. Right at the end of the game. In Kanto. Larvitar. In Kanto. The only Dark type you can get without fucking around is Umbreon. At least, the only good Dark type you can get without fucking around is Umbreon. You're not going to get much done with a Murkrow. Not in this generation, anyway. You can get Steelix and Cecil, but I can't remember where the metal coating is, but it's not early. On top of that, it's a trade evolution, which has always been annoying for people who don't have friends that play Pokemon, and that's become a more increasingly annoying thing as you get older. Yeah. But the core game is entertaining and enjoyable for the same reason Generation 1 is. However, I'd say that the region is more enjoyable. You have more freedom in Generation 2, I'd say, than Generation 1. I just think it's a better region. I love the new Pokemon. Lugia is a legendary I fucking love, of which there are very few. And yeah, it just felt like the most complete Pokemon experience. And to be honest, it would feel like the most complete Pokemon experience for a while. And this is not to say that I don't like future games, because Gen 3 is actually one of my favorite generations. But it really did feel like the most complete Pokemon experience, and for quite some time. Up until, I'd say, a game that I actually don't like, but I'll respect in terms of content. So, we'll get to there. But for now, Gen 2 is pretty damn good. And the Crystal version is just slightly better, as the third versions tend to be. These will change. I've got a feeling these will be pulled down over time, but, you know, we'll leave them there for now. So, let's get on to Generation 3, shall we? Actually, let's start with the remakes. The Gen 3 remakes of Red and Blue. Are they better? They are better. I don't think they're as good as Gen 2, but they are better. They're Generation 1 again, but with the additions of the Generation 3 stuff. So we've got held items, which I think, wait, held items was Gen 3 or was that Gen 4? Let me just quickly look. It was originally Generation 2. I think Generation 3 was when they really pushed it though, because initially held items were just berries and things. But in Generation 3 they did push it more with things like the Quick Claw, right? Again, when was the Quick Claw? Let me have a quick look. Because it's been some time now. And it's, you know, like a lot of people forget about the physical special split when they play the old games? Yeah, it's like that. That it was introduced in the original game. Sorry, in Gold and Silver. They could be held by Wild Sneasel, a 2% chance. Okay. But it was only in Generation 3, I think, where you're actually given them, was it? Anyway, so they were introduced in Generation 2, but Generation 3 really pushed it. But Generation 3 introduced double battles, it introduced abilities, and abilities really changed things up. In fact, especially with double battles, Pokemon with Levitate could avoid ground type damage. So one of my favorite things in Generation 3 was using Earthquake with a Pokemon that was a flying type or new Levitate. It was super simple, but it worked. It was so satisfying decimating the enemy team with that kind of combination. A Pokemon with Flash Fire, they get hit by a fire type move, they increase their power. Fantastic. You use an AoE fire type move on one of your Pokemon, like I think Overheat was one of them, deal damage to the enemy team, and raise the power of your other Pokemon. Again, Water Absorb, heals, and the best thing about Generation 3, my favorite type is Water. I learned this in Generation 2. Gen 2 is the first time I ever did a mono Water type run. A thing that I've done in pretty much every game except Pokemon Black and White, because it's kind of impossible to do in that game. But I've done a mono Water run in pretty much every single generation. I've not done one yet in Scarlet and Violet, but I will do. I like doing mono Water runs because Water types are my favorite. So in Generation 3, the whole too much water thing, it didn't really bother me. Although it is annoying constantly being attacked by tentacles. When you get up to that point in the game, buy a lot of repels. You're gonna use them. But the water types are my favorite anyway. So yeah, that was never much of an issue. And playing Water Absorb and Rain Dance and all this kind of thing, water weather teams were a lot of fun. Yes, I was that bastard. I was that asshole with the Politoed and the so on and so forth. Yes, I was that asshole. But Generation 3 has been my favorite generation for many years. It still is. There's another generation we'll talk about later that is a close second, but Generation 3 is my favorite generation. I've probably played Pokemon Emerald and Sapphire more than any other generation. It was so good. I love pretty much most of the new Pokemon added. Design-wise, at the very least, even if use-wise they're not that great. Like Roselia, for example, is great. Never used one in game, but Roselia, just the design is really cool. Spoink is cute. It's just a great entry. I really like Gen 3. The contests were introduced in Generation 3 as well. They're so fucking good. They're so good. The contests are a lot of fun. The only thing about them is they can get a little bit grindy with the berries, so it did take you a long time to get set up for that, but the contests were a lot of fun. I really liked them. I did like them better later on down the line when the process was a lot simpler though, because it was a grind. But contests were a lot of fun. I like the legendaries, but this is at the point where I kind of stopped using them. I did every now and again, but for the most part I stopped using them. Lugia and Mew were really the only legendaries I use. But you can't get Mew! You can. In the original games, you can fuck around with a trainer with a Slowpoke in her party. There's a specific glitch that you can do where essentially that Slowpoke has a specific trainer ID or something where I think it's like after that battle, if you go into the grass, the Pokemon you will encounter is Mew. I can't remember how to do it exactly, but I have got a legitimate Mew through that method before. And if you have the emulated versions that you can download, well, you used to be able to download on the 3DS, it works on that because I've done it. So yes, you can get Mew legitimately. And it's amazing because it's the perfect HM slave. Yes, I am the kind of asshole that has caught a Mew and used it as a HM slave before. But yeah, like, Mew and Lugia were the only ones that I've ever kind of used for a while. It changed later on, but much later on. I kind of stopped liking legendaries in terms of using them because later on it became design because they didn't look like Pokemon, and then around Gen 3 it's because they were just kind of too much, and I would rather use a pseudo legendary, you know what I mean, or something like that. Like, legendary Pokemon just don't feel like something I really should be using, you know. Catching, sure, studying it for science, but using it really kicked in at around Generation 3, and I do think it's a design thing, because Mew looks like a Pokemon, Lugia, Ho-Ho, they look like Pokemon, but I think around Generation 3 onwards, it's when the design started to get so imposing, where they looked like legendaries, and it was weird having one in a team with the rest of the group. It just didn't look right. But Generation 3 is amazing. I love it so much. So much. And we are getting to the point now, though, where I am going to be dropping these down. So, these guys are coming down. The D, these are coming down, and that's coming down, because they're all better games than Gen 3. And of course, Emerald is the superior version, so that's going ahead. But Gen 3 is amazing. I love it. It is the older game that I have played the most. Like, the most inconvenient games to play the most. I love Gen 3, and I actually still have them down here, I think. They're in the other drawer, aren't they? Yeah, that's too far out the way, but I still have all these games in the drawer down there. And yeah, they still work. I've got a GameCube with a Game Boy Advanced and Game Boy Color emulator. Sorry, adapter. So how I play these games now is I put them in the GameCube and I play them in a GameCube controller, because I do have that. I have that GameCube adapter. So I can just shove them in there and play them to this day. Really, really easy. That's how I've played a lot of these games for like the last few years when I wanted to play them again, because you just get to play them on the GameCube on your television. And yeah, I'm so glad that I have that, because that thing sells for a lot these days. A lot. I'm lucky that I have that. But yeah, like I just use the GameCube kind of like Game Boy Advance adapter, and I can play them that way. So they're not as inconvenient for me to play as they are for other people. But yeah, surprisingly, the batteries are still all working, and you can replace these batteries as well. So the batteries are still all working. They all save. I've not had an issue with them. So yeah, I still have all of these in the cupboard down there. Admittedly, my copy of Game Boy Crystal is Spanish, so that one's a bit difficult to play. I bought that when it was away one time. But Generation 3 is fantastic. Speaking of Generation 3, we've got more Generation 3 games down here. Pokemon Colosseum. Have we got X3 Gale? Yes, we do have XD Gale of Darkness. I fucking love Colosseum. Colosseum has some of the best music in the series. In fact, the music you're listening to right now is the Mirabee theme from Pokemon Colosseum, and it is like my favorite theme in the history of Pokemon. It is actually the reason why Ludicolo is one of my favorite Pokemon, because this guy having an entire team of Ludicolo just doing this to that music. Oh, it's like the greatest thing ever. And then they do a twirl and they do that when they do the moves. I love Gen 3. Colosseum is amazing. It is so much fun. And doing the 100 battle tower thing, where you go through 100 battles in that big tower where it gets more and more difficult, doing that with a team you've transferred over from your latest playthrough of Gen 3 is so much fun, because you get to take these Pokemon that were just simple Gen 3 sprites and then put them onto Colosseum, where they're like fully animated and look completely different, and you get to see them in animated 3D battles, which doesn't sound like much today, but keep in mind that the animations from back then, there were far fewer Pokemon. So the animations in Pokemon Stadium, Pokemon Colosseum, and I think there's the Wii entry later on down the line, which funny enough doesn't seem to be here because people forget that one for some reason. These games are, I don't know why they're in here, because they're not mainline Pokemon games, but I'm fine with it because I love them. But transferring a team over to that game and doing that whole thing in that team is so much fun, because you get to see your team in a whole new different way. You get to see them animated better than any of the future games, and it's just it's great. It's, to me, the Colosseum with Emerald or Ruby and Sapphire is a complete package, because it is just part of the fun of Generation 3. XD is Colosseum, but better. It removes a lot of the grind, and just makes a lot of good changes. On top of that, you start with an Eevee rather than an Umbreon and Espeon, so you actually get to choose what Pokemon you want. I typically go with Vaporeon because it's my favorite, but you get to choose. You can get like a stone really early on, like in like the first major city, and then you can choose which Eevee you want your evolution to become. Which evolution you want your Eevee to become. They implement a lot of changes. The only thing that sucks about XD is that you're AD. So the only thing that sucks about XD is you're not playing as Wes, which is without question the most badass Pokemon trainer we've ever had in a mainline game. Because he's an adult. He's not a 10-year-old. He's an actual adult, and he looks really cool. He's got like a blue trench coat. He's got his snag machine. But XD is really good. XD is Coliseum, but better. I fucking love these games so fucking much. But yeah, like Gen 3 is my favorite generation because pretty much every Gen 3 game that I remember playing back in the day was golden. Gen 3 is, I think, where we also got our first Mystery Dungeon game as well. Although I think that was around the time the DS was coming out. So I think that was like because one was on the Game Boy Advance and one was on the DS, so it did that. But Gen 3 was really, really good, man. Gen 3 was really, really, really good. But there are better games. But Gen 3 was the peak, I'd say, of that era of classic Pokemon, right? So, like, Game Boy Advanced, they are, like, original Pokemon. That's how I kind of separate the bracket. We've got original Pokemon, we've got DS Pokemon, we've got 3DS Pokemon, and then we've got modern Pokemon, or Switch, shall we say, Pokemon. So, moving on to Generation 4. I'm not going to put this in anywhere just yet, because you'll be surprised by where I put it based on how I'm going to start this. But, Gen 4. Gen 4 was the last feature-complete Pokemon game that we had. It was the last kind of continuation, I should say. Not feature-complete, but continuation. Pokemon Generation 4 contained everything that came prior. On top of that, it also introduced the physical special split, which Pokemon really needed, because the old system of certain types doing physical or special damage was really stupid. It was really stupid, it really limited a lot of Pokemon, and this physical special split was really what it needed. Unfortunately, the moves really weren't there, and a lot of Gen 4 Pokemon would actually only get good later on once new moves were existed. Luxray is a fantastic example of this. Luxray is an extremely popular Pokemon in Gen 4. Most teams have Luxray. However, it's not very good because it's a physical type, electric type user, and physical electric type moves just don't really exist outside of maybe Spark from Gen 4. So it's kind of crap. That was the biggest issue with the physical special split. At the start, it had the pains of the move pool not really being up to snuff with this change. However, it was a change that was much needed. On top of that, due to the ease of online connection, the DS really set the Pokemon competitive scene ablaze. Gen 4 was when the vast majority of people really started to get into competitive. Me, it was Gen 5. But for most people, it was Gen 4. On top of that, Generation 4 was pretty much the split in terms of the fandom. At the point this game came out, my generation was in higher education or work. We were adults at this point, and playing Pokemon was not really very cool. So the vast majority of people had kind of dropped Pokemon at this point. Not me though, I don't give a shit. I remember playing Nintendogs in the hallway whilst I was waiting for people to come back to class. Like, I don't give a shit, but for the vast majority of people, they did. They cared about keeping up appearances. And a lot of people at this point dropped off of Pokemon. They stopped playing. In fact, a lot of people even dropped off after Gen 2. They're typically the Gen 1ers. They've played Gen 1, Gen 2, and that's it. They've not realized just how good Gen 3 was. Gen 4 was the first game on the DS. So it basically brought in a whole new generation of people that fell in love with Pokemon, and Gen 4 was the reason why. Which is why, when it comes down to Pokemon's generation praise, the only generation to receive as much blind love as Gen 1 is Gen 4. Because if outside of Red and Blue, Gen 4 was when pretty much the secondary most people started playing this series. It was their first game. So it is very, very special to a lot of people. And as I said, like, it was the last game to contain everything. They also upheld item things even more. Gen 4 really pushed competitive. It made some really good balance changes that would be necessary for the future of the series. It started making Pokemon that were more powerful. It started really getting into the abilities on what they could do. Gen 4, design-wise, mechanic-wise, was really, really, really good. It was the pinnacle of what Pokemon could be. And it was an amazing game to start with if it was your first. However, I don't like it. Gen 4 is the first Pokemon game that I just do not like. And I'll explain. It was the first DS game. And Game Freak didn't really know how to develop for the DS just yet. It was painfully slow. Painfully sluggish. The most famous one is like a Chansey losing health, and you'd slowly watch for about 5 minutes while its health went down. Everything was so unbelievably painfully slow. On top of that, it also had more HMs than any game prior, which meant the basic pace of this game was painfully slow. Painfully slow. It was such a fucking bogged down chore to play. It was such a slog to play. But I could put up with that. Problem is, I don't like the majority of Gen 4 Pokemon. Hell, I'm a big fan of Eevee. I love the evolutions, hence the collection back there. But, I'll be honest, Leafeon and Glaceon are my least favorite of all of them. And are the ones that I've used the least. I've used Flareon more than I've used I've used Flareon more than I've used Leafeon and Glaceon. They're the most annoying evolutions to acquire, and they're just not that good. Ice types in general are not great, and when it comes to grass types, well, again, it's a physical grass type user, so at the time, not very good. Also, there are a lot of good grass types out there. And the only Generation 4 starter I like is Turtwig. So, no point me using it, really. I like a lot of grass types. Leafeon is never going to be the one I choose over most of the others. Unfortunately. Even though I love evolutions, yeah. I could probably name all the Pokemon I generally really like from Gen 4 on one hand. I mean, let's try and pull it out. We've got Lucario, but I'm kind of burned out on Lucario at this point. It's got like the Charizard effect where it's fucking everywhere. I like the Dragon from that generation, but it is one of my least favorite pseudo-legendaries. Garchomp. Garchomp is legitimately one of the most powerful Pokemon to ever be created, but it's okay, but I like it. I like it. I like Krogunk and Toxicroak. And I like the Slug ground water type. I forget, Gastrodon. I like Gastrodon. And I'll be honest, they're the only Gen 4 Pokemon I can think of that I like. And you notice the problem, by the way? Fighting type, ground type, ground type. Also, I'm using Turtwig. I really like Turtwig, so that's another ground type. Oh. I mean, you must like another Pokemon, right? Well, Lopunny is one of my favorite Pokemon. Legitimately. I love Lopunny. I use it every time I play Gen 4. It's not very good though, but I do legitimately love Lopunny. That is the only Gen 4 Pokemon outside of Torterra that I generally love. I like a few. I love 2. I also hate 2. Gen 4 is the only generation that has Pokemon that I actually hate. Not just dislike or don't care about, but actually fucking hate. And it's because they kind of ruined Pokemon I used to love. That's Rhyperior, yeah, Rhydon remains one of my all-time favorite Pokemon. I fucking love Rhydon a great deal. Rhyperior is the one of, if not the most unnatural looking, rushed design, hideous fucking creations Pokemon has ever made. It is a disgusting looking Pokemon. The only benefit of its existence is being able to use Eviolite on Rhydon. And then Licky Licky. It is not common to meet somebody who loves Lickitung, but in Generation 1, I love Lickitung because it was so hard to find, and there was always just something kind of pseudo-legendary about it for me. Don't ask me why, but Lickitung is not a Pokemon that shows up very often, and I know it's not very good, but there's just something that has always felt a little special about Lickitung for me, which is why I kind of love it. And then Licky Licky comes out, and it just looks wrong. It doesn't look natural. Generation 4 was the first generation where the Pokemon designs started to get a bit fucking off. Gen 1 and 2 had a uniform design philosophy. Generation 3 was like the best Pokemon would look for a while. And Generation 4 was when Pokemon started to get a little bit over-designed. I just don't like most Generation 4 Pokemon. Yeah, I don't like Staraptora. Kill me. Sue me. I'm sorry. I don't like Staraptora. I know it's an amazing Pokemon, and technically it's a lot better than Pidgeotto or Fearow or anything, or Swellow. I don't like it. It doesn't interest me. You know, I'll take it over Pidove, but I just don't like it. On top of that, outside of not liking the majority of the Pokemon, I don't like the majority of the NPCs. I don't care about the story. I don't like all the fucking legendaries that were introduced in this generation. I like Symphier. That's literally it. Symphier is like the best champion in the history of the series, but that's kind of it. Meaning, Generation 4 for me is a generation in which I can respect what it did for the series, but actually playing it is an unbelievably slow, boring slog in which I never have a team that I really enjoy unless I play like mono ground type or something. It's just not a generation I really enjoy at all. I don't have a connection to the Pokemon, I don't have a connection to the story, and the gameplay is so painfully slow. I really don't like it. So, if I'm going to be honest, Generation 4, on a technical level, I would put here. It's not as good as Generation 3, however, I can respect what it did for the series and why people loved it because it is feature complete. However, I'm going to put it here because I just do not enjoy it. Also, Vespiquen. I forgot about Vespiquen. I legitimately really like Vespiquen. It's a really cool bug type. It was the first bug type in the series outside of like Cypher or Caesar that was worth your time of day. However, the only way to get one is from Combi. It only evolves from female Combi. You have like what, a 5 to 10% chance of running into female Combi? How do you get female Combi? You put honey on tree and wait 12 real-time hours. Trying to get Munchlax or Heracross or Vespiquen or male Combi in this game is a fucking nightmare. Meaning, if you plan on having one of these in your team, it will halt your progress for weeks, months, whatever, while you wait to get lucky on the 12 real-time fucking hours you have to wait to get that. Each time. Fucking nightmare. Now, we'll get to the remakes later. But for now, I'm sorry, like, on a technical level, it is here. If you like the Pokemon, if you like the story, if the sluggishness of the gameplay doesn't bug you, I'd put it here. It's not as good as Gen 3, but it's damn good. It's definitely better than Gens 1 and 2. But for me, I hate this game. Platinum is a little bit better, but it also makes the best bit of the game worse. Platinum is balanced better, does a lot more to the story. The inversion world is kind of neat, but I don't care about legendaries and I don't care about the story, so it doesn't really do much for me. It does introduce the use of Houndoom, so you do get Pokemon that are pretty good in this generation, and what makes Houndoom so special is that I don't think it was in Generation 3, and it was one of the Pokemon that you couldn't get until Kanto in Generation 2. So Houndoom was actually the first time I actually used that Pokemon in the mainline series, because it popped up at a relative place. So Platinum is better if for Houndoom and a bunch of the other optional stuff aside. However, it makes the Symphier fight easier, which kind of ruins the best bit of that game. So, yeah. Now, that said, we've got Generation 4 remakes of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Now, the thing with this one is, it still has the sluggishness of Generation 4. It's a little bit better, but it still has the sluggishness on Generation 4. However, unlike Gen 4, the HMs aren't as bad. The Pokemon choices are better, although it still has the problem from Silver and Gold. However, you can transfer a Pokemon over. So if you want a Houndoom, if you've got this, there's a decent chance you've got the mainline Gen 4 games. So you can just send one over from Platinum, and you can have one that way. So it makes life a little bit easier. However, it really dives into the whole philosophy of Gen 2, which is basically play a little bit every day, to the point it comes with the Poke Walker. And believe it or not, the Poke Walker at the time was the strongest stepometer available by a country mile. It was so powerful. And believe it or not, I still have it to this day. It is downstairs in the cupboard by the living room chair because I use it. Gen 2 is a Pokemon game in which it is legitimately fun to add the stepometer as part of your daily routine, and then come back home and see what you got in your game. The stepometer really does elevate this game for me. On top of that, the Safari Zone adds a lot more of that sense of progress and discovery than the original, because the original kind of Safari Zones were a pain in the ass. You just had to chuck Pokeballs at things until they captured. The Safari Zones always confused me because they went completely against the philosophy of how you catch Pokemon. You're supposed to weaken them first, but you can't do that in the original Safari Zones. You just have to chuck rocks and Pokeballs at it until it stays in the bowl. It's a really bad fucking design. But thankfully, in Generation 4, that had changed. So the Safari Zone is so much better and has so many more options than in the original game. On top of that, you've got the I think it's called the Poke Triathlon. It's like the Olympics for Pokemon. And what this thing did was really elevate Pokemon that you would have never used. Pokemon like Voltorb, for example, a Pokemon, let's be honest, nobody uses in their team, is actually really good for certain minigames in the Triathlon because it's so fucking fast. It did what contests did in Generation 3 and 4, where it gave use to Pokemon you would never use in battle, but you could raise for something else. It was a brilliant addition, and I'm really sad that we've never seen it again. The Poke Triathlon, in my opinion, is the most fun bit of side content and like minigame content in all of the series combined. It's a lot of fun. I love the Triathlon. On top of that, let's be honest, best feature about Heart Gold Soul Silver, the Pokemon follow you. You can have your best friend follow you like you could in Pokemon Yellow all those years ago. And you could turn around and you could talk to it and you could see how it felt and what it was thinking of, or whether or not it saw something interesting on the floor. It's like having a pet. You're constantly taking your Pokemon for a walk, and then once you've finished playing Pokemon, you start up your Poke Walker, you put it on your belt, and you go and take your real Pokemon, your pets, your dogs for a walk. It is a Pokemon game that has the Animal Crossing effect. It fits as a natural part of your life and routine. And because of all these improvements that came with the Generation 4 physical special split, as well as the increased importance of held items, on top of the abilities that came in Generation 3, on top of just all these other extra additions, Heart Gold and Soul Silver is peak Pokemon. It's one of the best games in the series, legitimately. It still has the problems of Generation 2. They're just not as bad because you can transfer some Pokemon over easier from, like, the new Pokemon easier from Generation 4, like, if they're in it, such as Houndoom. So it alleviates some of that kind of repetitiveness and catching the same Pokemon all the time. You've got more options because of transferring over. There's just so much to it. There's so much to it. And Heart Gold and Soul Silver really made up the disappointment that was Diamond and Pearl for me, because essentially it had all the positives of Diamond and Pearl outside of the inclusion of the contests, along with all the good bits of Generation 2. It's peak Pokemon. Alright. On to Generation, I was going to say 6, but we're on to Generation 5 now. Pokemon Black and White. Pokemon Black and White is super funny because, I'm going to put it there for now, but it will be moved. Pokemon Black and White is super funny because in the community, sorry, I got something in my mouth there. In the community, it's gone from the most hated game in the series to the most commonly praised game in the series. It took I consider Pokemon Black and White the World of Warcraft Mists of Pandaria of Pokemon. In that it is a game everyone hated and shat all over, but over time we've kind of collectively realized that, you know what, this was actually really good. The problem with Black and White is it's Pokemon. Pokemon Black and White has more new Pokemon than any game in the series, outside, of course, the first one, because there is no old Pokemon. And as someone who is getting really fucking sick of Generation 1 Pokemon at this point, I welcomed it. There's a lot of good Pokemon in Generation 5. In fact, some of the best designs in the series at that point came in Generation 5. But so did some of the worst. It is very black and white in terms of its Pokemon designs. Seriously, some of the best and some of the worst Pokemon designs came from this generation. But because of the sheer quantity of Pokemon, as well as Pokemon Black and White pulling a Pal World and kind of plagiarizing itself. I love Pal World, don't take that, don't start war over the comments on that. Pal World is amazing. But essentially many of the new Pokemon introduced in this generation were filling in for the old Pokemon. But I'll let you into a bit of a secret. I prefer a lot of the Gen 5 ones. Fro and Sork, compared to Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. I will take Sork any day. I fucking love Sork. Fro is good as well, but Fro was more defensive. If you have a Sork, it will dominate that game. Sork is so good. That's a very uncommon opinion, but I prefer Sork and Fro over Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. They just don't look as weird to me. I prefer, again, uncommon opinion, I prefer Swoobat over Zubat. I just do. I think this cute little hot-nosed fucker is quite good. Its ability is useful. I like it. You know, I do prefer Golem over the Rock type from Generation 5, but I still really like the Rock type from Generation 5. A lot of Pokemon in Generation 5 I fucking love. It actually introduced the first electric type Pokemon that I love. Don't get me wrong, I really like Electabuzz. I really like Electabuzz. I really like, Ampharos. But I never loved an electric type until Black and White. And that was Joltik and Galvantula. They were really good. Not only was this a Pokemon that was an electric type that I fell in love with, but it was a bug type that was legitimately really fucking good. Galvantula was great. In fact, there were a few bug types in this generation that were really fucking good. It also introduced Ferrothorn, and that is why I got into fucking competitive. because I decided to get into breeding for the first time, outside of just breeding to fill up the Pokedex. I got into breeding in Generation 5, and I bred a Ferrothorn with perfect IVs, which I've still got to this day. Well, perfect IVs except its speed, which had a negative, because of Gyro Ball, which I think was in that generation. Let me have a look. Gyro Ball Pokemon. When was that introduced? Alright, it is. It's a Generation 4 move. Good, I was just checking. I was sure it was in that game, because I might be misremembering, because I also did a shit ton of breeding in Gen 6. And I had that Ferrothorn in Gen 6. I transferred it over, so I was just making sure, you know. Ferrothorn is fucking amazing. I love Sawsbuck. The whole gimmick of the weather with Sawsbuck was so good. I can just sit here talking about Pokemon from Generation 5 that are really good, that I really like. Axew. I will take Haxorus over, is it Garchomp? The ground dragon type from the prior generation any day. It's fucking axe tusks. Garchomp, like, Haxorus is so fucking cool. I love it. It's not as good as Garchomp. Garchomp remains legitimately one of the most powerful Pokemon in the series, but I prefer Haxorus. I just think it looks cool. It looks more like a dinosaur. It's cool. I love Gen 5. I love Gen 5. I love a lot of the new Pokemon. I love the gym leaders. I love the story. It's overhyped, admittedly. The Pokemon Gen 5 story is overhyped, and it's overhyped because, quite frankly, story in Pokemon games is like story in fighting games. Like story in Monster Hunter games. For many, many years, it was just kind of thrown in there randomly as a last-minute thing, or not really considered. It was always just kind of an excuse to do the fun part of the game, the gameplay. So when Pokemon actually put some real effort into its story and tried to actually tell a story, it stood out. It was like playing Monster Hunter 4U for the first time, where it actually tried to introduce a story. You know, this might be weird for those of you who have only played World, but story was never really a thing in Monster Hunter at all. It was just like, here, go hunt. You know, go do these, go, you know, do this thing for these people. You know, keep this village safe and stocked up and so on and so forth. And the same thing with fighting games. And like the very first fighting game I ever played with a story that was legitimately part of the game, rather than just side contact you could get into if you wanted to, was probably one of the modern Mortal Kombat games. So it took a while, a long time to get to that point. So is it the greatest writing of all time that stands toe-to-toe with some of the greatest RPGs and JRPGs ever made? Fuck no. It's stupid as all hell and doesn't make sense when you stop to think about it for 5 seconds. But is it good for Pokemon? Hell yeah. It really is. Gen 5 is great. It really is. Gen 5 is fantastic. However, I hate most of the Pokemon. Well, I dislike most of the Pokemon in Gen 4. And I know a lot of people dislike Gen 5 Pokemon. You know, I know they do. So I'm going to be fair, and I'm going to say that as much as I love Black and White 2 did a far better job. So I'm going to put Black and White... The music is incredible as well. It's even a meme, like Black and White hits different, because the music is something completely beyond. I'm going to put Black and White here. I'm going to put it behind Emerald and Colosseum and all that, because I do love it, but it is less feature complete than a lot of these games, Emerald especially. And on top of that, it's brand new Pokemon. And if you do not like these brand new Pokemon, then there's not going to be much there for you. But I'm going to put it out there for the, like, basically the improvements that came to the series, and because I think it's a great game. However, Pokemon Black and White 2, if I can find it down here, it's not here. Oh no, there it is, Black and White 2. Pokemon Black and White 2 is peak Pokemon. One of the first areas in the game allows you to capture a Lillipup, which, here's the thing, for all the praise that I give Black and White 2, I dislike all the starters. I don't like any of the starters. I typically choose Oshawa because Samurott is the best HM slave in the game. I'm being entirely serious. Samurott is the best HM slave in the game, which is the sole reason I choose it. I do not like any of the Generation 5 starters. Lillipup is typically my starter because I own Yorkies in real life. I've always had Yorkies as dogs, and I love Herdier. The fact that the fucking Yorkshire Terrier was not in Sword and Shield blows my fucking mind to this day. But anyway, I love Herdier. I love Stoutland. I love Lillipup so much. I love the Yorkshire Terrier dog Pokemon. So one of the first areas in the game, you can catch Lillipup. You can catch Mareep, a really good electric type that's a lot of people love. You can catch Railu, which evolves through friendship into Lucario, a really good steel fighting type that a lot of people love. And you can catch, I think, Marill and Psyduck. All pretty popular, outside of maybe Psyduck because of Golduck, pretty popular Pokemon. One of the biggest complaints people had with Gen 5 is that water types didn't really exist until post-game. You didn't really even get a fucking fishing rod until post-game. Well, they've given you a few water types right away in Psyduck and fucking Marill. Not the best, but in fact, fun fact, the first time I played Pokemon Black and White 2, I used a Golduck. And it was great. Oh, and you can also get, Growlithe in that first area as well. I think it's in that first area, correct me if I'm wrong. But the first kind of farmland in the game, you can get some of the most popular Pokemon in the series. And they're all good, or decent enough for that point in the game. And I feel as if this is sort of Game Freak going, right, we've heard you, we really wanted this to be like a brand new set of Pokemon to really kind of like differentiate from the rest of the series. But we've heard you, we know you love the old Pokemon, so here you can have some of them back as well. And they mixed the old with the new, and it's got a better start. On top of that, I just think the story's better. I think it flows better. I think it's more interesting. You can get Zoroark for the first time because it was an event Pokemon initially, but you can actually get given one, which means you can breed N Zoroark to have one that you can name yourself as soon as you can get a Ditto or something. Great. You can actually have Zoroark properly in-game for the first time. I have never been in to the super hardcore endgame not competitive, but the Battle Tower stuff. However, the Battle Tower in Black and White 2 is the best in the series because you've got characters coming in from prior games. You can fight Red, you can fight Blue, you can fight Cynthia, you can fight gym leaders and champions and characters from the prior generations. They all come to this one stadium to fight, and it's so fucking good. It's got some of the best gym leaders in the series, including the new Poison Trader, P-O-K-E-M-O-N, Pokemon. I love that shit. Like Gen 5 Black and White 2, one of the best games in the series. In fact, if it wasn't for the other features in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I would consider this the best game in the series. But because Heart Gold and Soul Silver has so much more going for it, it inches ahead. But in terms of just in general playing the game and the natural flow of the game, this is the best game in the series. If we're talking about features, Heart Gold, Soul Silver. If we're talking about the actual enjoyment of playing and the flow of the game and all that, Black and White 2. On top of that, Black and White 2, in my opinion, this was the peak of Pokemon art direction. No game in the history of the series has looked as beautiful as Black and White 2. Because unfortunately after this, we go 3D. And this is the start, in my opinion, of Pokemon games going downhill. That doesn't mean they're bad. In fact, I'm going to defend Pokemon Generation 6 more than most people will. Because it does a lot good. However, frigging Pokemon Black and White 2, peak Pokemon. one of the best games in the series, if not the best game in the series. The only issue I really have with Black and White 2 is all the fucking legendaries. Oh my god, I don't care. I do not care about all the legendaries and mythicals. The only thing I do with them is capture them, fill up the Pokedex, and shove them in the fucking Pokemon storage. I don't care. They are over-designed, hideous, fucking Digimon boss level looking creatures. I do not like them. I complained about Generation 4 getting a bit over-designed in their designs, but Generation 5 is insane. The legendaries... Imagine having a fucking Golduck or a goddamn fucking Herdier stood next to, what's it called, like Zekrom or something? One of the legendaries from fucking Black and White. It looks ridiculous. It's like Cthulhu sat next to a fucking puppy. It looks fucking ridiculous. It just does not merge with the rest of the team. It doesn't gel. It looks fucking stupid. So yeah, I don't like a lot of legendaries or mythicals. In fact, the ones that I do like end up looking just like basic Pokemon and not like these big, glorious... Basically, what I'm saying is a lot of legendaries and mythicals look like bosses. They don't look like party members. They look like the things your party members fight. So it's weird catching one and adding it to your team. It just doesn't gel. But Black and White 2 is peak Pokemon. It is everything good about Pokemon Black and White, plus more, and plus a lot of the things that people didn't like about that game, such as it's added Pokemon from the past generations. And they've done it well as well. They've got some really good ones from the prior games in here. So it is probably one of the most fun games to build a team in. It looks amazing. The Pokemon sprites are the best they've ever been. They've got little animations to them. The character design is amazing. The story is really good. The Pokemon Battle Tower is the only one I've ever really gotten into, purely because it's just so fun just seeing all these different characters from the past games coming back. Really, really good. And again, Black and White music hits different. It just hits. It hits so much. I love it, I love it, I love it. Right, moving on to Pokemon X and Y. Okay. I'm going to move... I'm going to leave them there. This is going to piss people off. I am putting Pokemon X and Y here. X and Y might just be the most universally hated game in the series, bar one we'll talk about later. However, X and Y did a lot good. No game in the history of Nintendo, never mind just Pokemon, has had an online system as good as this, which unfortunately we're going to lose very, very soon. Playing X and Y feels like you're part of a community, because underneath you can see all the people that the internet is connected to that are playing. You've got little profiles to show off your favorite Pokemon, so you can show off your shiny that you've caught, like my Hawlucha. You can show off your shiny. You can show off your favorite Pokemon. You've got little things that show off your favorite gym leader, your favorite type. You can customize your character, and your customized character in terms of the way they dress at the very least will show up at the bottom. And you can very, very easily trade with other people. You can easily battle with other people. You can easily send each other O-Powers, which, because O-Powers are cheaper to send to other people than to use yourself, sending O-Powers to other people through the internet whilst is a really good way to level them up to level 3 and make them stronger to eventually use on yourself. So that's how I powered up all of mine. I sent them to random people. I'm playing this game online, and randomly getting an O-Power at a clutch moment is really cool. It also made the game really fun to play while watching Twitch. I have never been the kind of person to watch Twitch, but I did with Pokemon X and Y. I remember watching Mariland, and his, I think he did a wedlock or something, and he was trading Pokemon away at the end of it, and basically it was a case of get the timing right, land up, and you may get a Mariland Pokemon. I never managed to, but it was fun to watch. You could send him O-Powers whilst he was playing if you saw him on your things. Like, shit, that's Mariland. This is, you know, it's... Pokemon X and Y was a community, and it was done in a far better way than any other way they've tried to force this shit. It was my version of how many people experienced Generations 4 Underground, where it was like a big community thing. This is that. It was just this big fucking community that they did so well. And playing this game, you could see, it was just fun. You saw other people's Pokemon show up on the bottom as well during Pokemon-Ami. I love Pokemon-Ami. It was a little Nintendogs mode where you could pet your Pokemon and feed it treats and to play little mini games with it, like the header one I always went with, and make them more powerful and like you more. And if they liked you so much, they could randomly live on 1 hit point, which, to be honest, has made for some really fun clutch moments whilst playing the game. X and Y isn't difficult, but it's still really cool seeing a Pokemon live that would have otherwise died on 1 hit point. They can shrug off paralysis and other status moves and like poison and things if you level up their friendship or whatever, this new fondness or whatever it was called, so much. It was a really good system. They also gave you super training, in which for the very, very, very first time you could see EVs and IVs. Well, through Black and White, I was also already into breeding, and now I was into it even more. Well, you couldn't see individual values, you still needed to go for an NPC for that, but you could see IVs. On top of that, it gave you a really easy way to reset your IVs. Prior, you had to continuously feed it specific berries to lower its IVs, and that took ages to farm. In X and Y, you could get a white punching bag from just randomly a random drop by just playing the game, and then when it came to the point where you were going to level up your IVs, you could use that punching bag. It would reset your IVs, and then you could play the balloon mini games to specifically set your IVs far, far, far faster, and in a way that is easier to follow and calculate than the old way in which you'd battle very, very specific Pokemon. It took a quarter of the time than it used to. It was far easier. It was a far more casual way to get up like strong, like competitive ready Pokemon. They made that easier than ever before. It was very, 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 very good in terms of what X and Y brought to the table. It was the easiest community, the best community, the best way of like breeding and making up big. I think, in fact, I enjoyed X and Y so much that I have I have like over 600 and odd hours on that thing according to my DS. More now because I played through it recently, and I bred eggs like crazy. I bred shinies for the first time. I got myself a shiny Ninetales way back when from doing it that way. I bred shinies for the first time, specifically with like perfect IVs. And I completed the Pokedex for the first time in years. I think the last time I did it was like Generation 1. I never really, maybe 3. I think I did it once in Gen 3. But yeah, I hadn't done it properly in a long time. I loved X and Y so much I completed the Pokedex, which made shinies easier because you got the shiny charm. There was also the Pokemon Battle Mansion, which was amazing. You could get money and level Pokemon up so easy through that. As you fought in the Pokemon Mansion, you would rank up and you could spend money on getting like leveling up the kind of people you would fight, so you'd get more experience. You could spend money on getting more reward money. You could spend money on all kinds of things, and it was a great way of grinding out money. It was a great way of grinding out levels. It was just, and when you bought one of these things, it would apply to the whole day. So the Battle Mansion was really good. Again, all these things that I'm mentioning are things that nobody fucking talks about, because when it comes to X and Y, all people mention are the fucking Mega Evolutions, which I'll be honest, I never used. I did a little bit, I fucked around with it a little bit, but I didn't really care about Mega Evolution. It was just an extra animation for more power against a game that really didn't need it. I beat the Rock Gym with a Charmeleon, for fuck's sake. This was not a difficult game. It was not a difficult game. I used Pokemon Mega Charizard X because it was a black Charizard with blue flame and it was edgy and badass. The sole reason I even had a Charizard, because I was kind of getting sick of Charizard and Gen 1 in general, but the fact that they made Charizard the Black Dragon, I like that. So I went for that. I had 2 fire types in my team, actually, for that game. I had a Delphox and a Charizard, which wasn't the most optimal thing, but I didn't care. The game was easy enough. Who the fuck cares? I love, speaking of Pokemon, they did the complete opposite to Generation 5. It was like, what, 78, 79 new Pokemon in this generation, if that. And almost all of them were fantastic. Not all of them, but almost all of them. They introduced what would be my favorite Pokemon, Hurlucha. I got a shiny one, as I've mentioned many times. I've had it in every game since. I caught it in the Friend Safari, which was another really cool feature of Pokemon X and Y. Every friend you had on the 3DS unlocked a Friend Safari. And in that Friend Safari, there was free Pokemon that you could find. I got mine in a random Friend Safari. I had YouTubers and streamers. I think I've still got some of them to this day, actually, on my 3DS friends list, because they would just do that. People would share their friend code around because they were like, okay, what Friend Safari you had? And people would share their friend code around. You know, I remember Blunty doing a video about this years ago. I think I might have him on my 3DS. I honestly can't remember. It's been years since I've looked at my friend list on there, because nobody goes on the 3DS anymore. But I had so many YouTubers and streamers on top of my usual friends on my 3DS, because people, and just random people online, because people were sharing their friend codes for the Friend Safari. It was cool, because it was like a grab box. You didn't know what you were going to get. It was complete, like, random, it seemed, what was assigned to everyone. I can't remember what mine was. I think mine was Bug. I think I had a Heracross or something, but beyond that, I can't remember. But, yeah, like, it's great. And I watched a video recently, actually, of a girl playing through X and Y for the first time in years, just so she could fuck around with the Friend Safari a little bit for the last time before the server shut down. So I know I'm not the only one going through these games one last time. Before this all shuts down. It's really good. Now, I am talking about features and mechanics and what you could do. The problem with X and Y is that it was kind of a joke. Oh, it also introduced the furry type, which has become one of my favorite types, and has become one of the favorite types of most people, to be perfectly honest. My favorite types are water, steel, and furry. You know, in that order. And yeah, furry really shut up there. Furry is better than dragon. Furry has really made dragons nowhere near as broken as they used to be. Unfortunately, furry is kind of the new psychic. Furry is better furry is like the best fucking type these days. Pokemon are typically made better if they have furry types. You know, the ice and furry type Ninetales that will be introduced in the next generation, that was usable because it was a furry type, not because it was an ice type. The ice type was saved by the furry type. But it also made it so poison type Pokemon were useful for once. Having a poison type on your team now or at least poison moves, is as necessary as having ice moves were back when dragons ruled the roost. Because it's the only thing that really stops furry. Unless they have a furry steel type. At which point you need fire, because otherwise you're going to be fucked. Because furry steel is one of the strongest type combinations in the game. It's like groundwater. It's really good. But anyway, X and Y failed because it was too easy. The problem was, because of the way they changed the experience share, the game was either too easy or it was brutally difficult. If you turned off the experience share, the game would overlevel you like crazy. If you had the experience share on, you would overlevel the game like crazy. So you'd have to turn it off and on and off and on and off and on all the time to kind of like make it balanced, and who the fuck is going to do that? As I said, I defeated the Rock Gym with a Charmeleon, for fuck's sake. You shouldn't be able to do that. It's a Rock Gym. You shouldn't be able to do that. It didn't even really have any super effective moves as far as I can remember. I think it had like Slash or something. I can't remember. But I only remember the gyms because I decimated them. The fighting gym was completely decimated by me having a dual blade, a steel ghost type, because despite the fact that you can get this thing really early, that she has no coverage moves, no dark type moves or anything in order to stop a dual blade. She has nothing. So Doublade just decimates her entire team, and there's literally nothing she can do to hit it or do anything for it. She's fucked. The grass gym is decimated by any fire type. I had 2 of them. You know, the furry gym is probably the only one that stands out. But again, if you've got a poison type, you're fine. She's got a Mawile, so again, just use the fire type. You know, it's... Nobody really used the Mega Evolutions either. Mega Evolutions were this massive thing, and it would have been really cool if more people used it. Like, I don't know, the gym leaders, but they don't. Nobody uses it for the most part. It shows up every now and again for a bit of a spectacle, and that's it. Team Fleur is kind of stupid, and the overall story of X and Y would actually be one of the best in the series if it was finished. But it wasn't. This isn't just me shitting over, like saying, oh, this is a rush job. No, it wasn't finished. The X and Y story was a rush job. It wasn't finished. Zygarde just kind of randomly showed up at the end, and everything that they should have done with Zygarde in Pokemon X and Y, they did in Sun and Moon. Zygarde was like a Slugma situation where it was introduced in Gen 6, but they did nothing with it until it was outside of its own generation. It was weird. So overall, I love playing X and Y. And I love playing X and Y because the fact is that all the different features it has to make life easier, and like the Pokemon-Ame, the super training, the online experience, the nostalgia I have with the online experience, the Pokemon Battle Mansion, the Friend Safari, all this stuff piles up together to make a really, really good Pokemon experience. I'm one of the best in the series. A lot of this is going to be lost when the server's gone down, but as I say, it's made for one of the best Pokemon games in the series. The game itself kind of falters, but it also makes up for that for having a really good Pokedex. Pretty much nearly all of the new Pokemon introduced are absolute bangers, and it's also got Pokemon that you wouldn't see until much later on in other games. You can get an Axew or a Gibble really early on. They can do that now. They can add Dragon-type Pokemon really early on because they're not broken anymore, because Furry types exist. They're not broken anymore. That's really fucking cool. So you don't need to wait until near the end of the game to get your fucking Dragon type. You can get it and have it with you throughout the rest of your journey. Meaning you're going to bond with that Dragon far more because the game's just balanced better now. You've got all kinds of Pokemon everywhere. Every single patch of grass. You're not just going to get like 2 or 3 Pokemon and then move on. There's a lot of Pokemon in every patch of grass that you can get. Like, there's a lot of variety in how you build your team in that game because the game is better balanced now thanks to the new Fairy type. And there's just so many Pokemon. On top of that, because there are so few new Pokemon, most of them are really good, and it means they fill up the rest of the Pokedex with some of the most popular and best Pokemon in the fucking series. The building your team in X and Y is really good. So it's not peak Pokemon, and I would be an absolute piece of shit to put it up there. However, it is really good. It is really good, and I will defend X and Y until the cows come home. Yeah, there are some problems with the game. The story isn't finished, and honestly, if the story was finished, it really would have elevated it quite a bit. X and Y could have been another Black and White in terms of its story. It really could have been. There's some heavy shit there. We're talking about a war. We're talking about a fucking nuclear, like a nuke fucking weapon kind of machine that used the souls of Pokemon in order to power it. This is some World of Warcraft Gul'dan opening the fucking gate bullshit. Like, this is heavy shit. They could have done a lot with it, but they didn't, because they didn't finish it. And everything's just kind of half-assed and disconnected and doesn't quite make sense because it was never finished. Hopefully, the new Legends game coming up, Pokemon AZ, yeah, or ZA, AZ, you know the name of the big guy that started the whole war thing off? That's interesting. Hopefully, that will fill in for where the story in Pokemon X and Y failed. But Until then, we have Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which had all of the online features of Pokemon X and Y. Fantastic. Including the Pokemon Amine and Super Training. It also had the Pokemon, I forget what it was called, but the navigation system where a Pokemon would pop up in grass, meaning you could really chain Pokemon for shinies really early, really easily. You could get Pokemon with good IVs and hidden moves through this method really well. It actually became addictive. And early on, if I wanted the good routes, I would fuck around in one of the first areas for hours until I got a really good routes right at the start of the game with good IVs and maybe even one of the egg moves. It's a really good system. It's a very, very good system. On top of all the great shit that came in X and Y. The only thing it didn't have that X and Y had was the Friend Safari, the Battle Mansion, and trainer customization, unfortunately. But it's also set in Generation 3, which is my favorite generation. So of course I love it. I love all the starters. Admittedly, Torchic a lot less than the other two, but I love all the starters. I love most of the Pokemon from this region. They've added Mega Evolution, which is a fun little side addition. I love how Generation 1 got Mega Evolutions, Generation 3 got Mega Evolutions, but the Pokemon that was introduced as starters in Generation 6 didn't. Generation 6 was when I really started to dislike Generation 1, especially Charizard, even though I did use it. That's when things started to get a bit fucking ridiculous with Charizard. But Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire was everything that I love about Generation 3 with a lot that I love about Generation 6. It didn't have the Battle Tower, which was a massive disappointment to a lot of people. However, you know the way the guy says they don't think people use it? I never have. And I'm honestly curious how many people have played Pokemon that really get into the Battle Tower. I think most people try it a little bit, realize that they're going to need to breed very specific Pokemon in order to do it, and then, like, fuck this and move on to something else. I think that's most people's experience. The only time I've ever done the Battle Tower, as I've said, was Pokemon Black and White 2, because the way that whole thing was set up, they made it interesting. It wasn't just a series of challenges, they actually made connections to past games, which made doing it very, very fun and interesting. But outside of that, I've never bothered with it, because it's just a lot of busy work for, like, what, a ribbon? It's just not worth it. It's bragging rights more than anything else. I think the only people that really get into that were the kind of people that really got into competitive. And again, that is a very, very niche market. The vast majority of people who play Pokemon do not give a fuck about competitive. And the vast majority of people who give a fuck about competitive really kind of play Pokemon like most MMO players, where they don't give a shit about anything but the end game, so they can start building up their teams. So they're not really into Pokemon, they're just really into competitive. You know, so it's a very different thing. So I actually do kind of agree. The majority of people don't give a fuck about the Battle Tower. That being said, it should have been included. I agree. However, considering the fact that this has everything I love about Gen 3, with everything I love about Gen 6, for the most part, it doesn't have customization. This is peak Pokemon. It's one of the best games in the series. It really is peak Pokemon. It's not as good as the other two in peak Pokemon, but it really is peak Pokemon. It's one of the best experiences you can have. And I've really missed Generation 6 online community. I've really missed watching people like Mariland and shit, what was his name? There was so many. There were a few PokeTubers I used to watch back then that I don't anymore. One of them had fucking dyed hair all the time, and his favorite type was water, just like me. I think his favorite Pokemon was Poliwhirl. I can't remember who it was exactly. If you watch PokeTubers, you'll know what I'm talking about. I know I used to watch a lot of Jay Witts back then as well. I don't watch him anymore. I've not watched him in years. I'm nothing against him. I just don't watch him anymore. I watched a lot of his stuff, and like Gen 6 was great. Gen 6 was felt like a real community. It really did. It was, and most of that was because of the sheer ease of connecting with people through that system. And even as somebody with social anxiety that doesn't like to do a lot of online stuff, like I never traded, I never battled, but I did interact with people. People would like send hearts to your profile. Like usually you'd get that if you had a shiny on your profile, or if you sent them something like an O power, like, you know, that they really needed or benefited from. You'd see people receive that, look who sent it to them, and like, cool, I'll give you a heart in your profile. It was great. I don't have my original save in Pokemon X anymore. I've reset it since to play again. But that, I had so many hearts. I had so much like record shit on that thing. I had everything out on max. Like, I played a lot of X and Y. And Oras is just, yeah, it's everything I love about fucking Gen 3, plus everything I love about Gen 6, plus even more stuff. You got the Pokemon Rainbow Rocket stuff, which was kind of fun. You've got the riding a Latias or Latios in the sky as you're going through warp holes and finding like unique Pokemon that you wouldn't otherwise find in that generation. A lot of kind of fun endgame stuff to do. It's really good. It's one of the best games in the series. Peak Pokemon. Right then, here's where things start to get very, very difficult. Pokemon Sun and Moon. This is the one I'm playing currently. I'm playing Pokemon Moon. I'm on the last island. This one is difficult. Pokemon Sun and Moon has, well, let's just go, like, Decidueye is my favorite starter. I don't think I love any starter as much as I love Decidueye. It is a brown and green, my favorite colors. Owl, I love owls. That evolves into a badass archer. Archery is one of my favorite archetypes in fantasy. It uses its own quills, its own feathers, I should say, as arrows. It uses its wing as its bow. I personally think that Decidueye is one of the best designed Pokemon in history. Everything about that is so unique and thoroughly thought out. You can tell what it is, but it's not over, like, you can tell it's based on an owl, but it doesn't look just like an owl. Its first form is cute, and you just want to squeeze it in plush form. Its second form isn't awkward. Its second form has a lot of, like, it looks very preppy. It even does this when it attacks. It laps. It's a shitty, snarky teenager that's obsessed with its hair. It's got so much personality. And by the time it becomes an adult and turns into a Decidueye, it is this cool, calm, confident, silent archer. So silent because owls fly silently, almost like a ghost. The problem with it is that it's ghost type, and Sun and Moon is full of dark types. Decidueye is a weird case of a Pokemon that is fucking incredible in every single generation except its own. I've got my original Decidueye in Pokemon Sword and Shield, and it was incredible. I put it in post-game, and it just decimates everything. Its typing is so good outside of its own generation, which is just so funny. But I completely adore all three Generation 7 Pokemon. Incineroar is amazing. Primarina is arguably the best choice for the game. Fucking water furry type. Two of my favorite types rolled into one. Hell yes, Primarina is awesome. But Decidueye is my favorite star. It's one of my all-time like top 5 favorite Pokemon. I love it so much. It feels like it was designed for me. I love a lot of the Pokemon from this generation. Friggin' Galizapod is kind of annoying in terms of its ability, but it has a lot of personality. I love Salazzle, one of my favorite Pokemon. I love the Alolan forms, especially Marowak. Alolan Marowak, essentially, here's my problem with Cubone. I love Cubone. A lot of people have a close, like, personal connection to Cubone if they've played Gen 1, because Cubone's story is just so sad. It's the kind of Pokemon you just want to pick up and hug and go, you've not got your mother anymore, little guy, but you're gonna come with me, huh? And I'll take care of you. We'll be together. You won't be on your own. You just come with me, little guy. And you want to go on an adventure. In fact, I'm just going to jump ahead. One of the best things about Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee is your rival actually picks up that Cubone. Your rival gets that Cubone, and I think that's so sweet. But I never really liked Marowak. I like Cubone. I love Cubone, but I never really liked Marowak. Alolan Marowak is badass. It's a fucking fire dancer. And it's black with a skull, which means it's edgy as fuck and goth as fuck. I love it. I love it so much. It's so fucking cool. It's a fucking... It dances with a bone on fire. It's a fucking, like, skull-wearing fire dancer. It's badass. I've always loved Ninetales, and Alolan Ninetales is honestly just a better design of Ninetales. It's sleek and elegant and gorgeous. And it's also nice to actually use an ice type outside of the only two ice types I will ever use, being Lapras, a water ice type, because the water adds some defensiveness to the worst type in the game, and fucking a Walrein, same situation. So yeah, it's also nice to use an ice type outside of that. I love Dramper because he reminds me a lot of Falcor from The Neverending Story, a big childhood movie of mine. And I could just sit here going on all day about like the Pokemon I love from this generation. I also love Team Skull. I love Team Skull's music. I love Team Skull's rapping. I love how fucking derpy they look. Like, one of the best things about playing that game, you play play Sun and Moon, and you look at Team Skull doing all this, and then you add music like Dancing Queen, long and seen all the time. I don't know the lyrics, but you know the idea. Just add random lyrics to Team Skull doing all this, and it's the funniest shit. I love Team Skull's design. I love Team Skull's personality. I love Team Skull's music. And honestly, out of the entire series, at some point you get bored fighting the bad Team Grunts. I never did with Team Skull because their music is so good and they're just so stupid in the way they're animated. They're my favorite team. I keep meaning to go on Etsy and buy like a hat, like one of those Team Skull hats, because there are people on Etsy that make them. I really want to get one of those Team Skull hats and just like, you know, go wear it one day. But it's just like, I love Team Skull so much. I think the Ultra Beasts are a really cool idea because yes, they are over designed, and no, they don't look like Pokemon. However, that's the point. They're not meant to be Pokemon. Well, they are, but they're meant to be Pokemon from a different universe. That's kind of cool. That's a really creative way of getting around the limitations of making Pokemon that on Digimon, essentially, whilst giving you the opportunity, basically giving you the opportunity of making more weird looking or detailed, intricate designs. Just Ultra Beasts. Really cool concept. I love how the Aether Foundation ends up being the bad guys. It's a case of they're like wildlife preservationists and people that come in with the idea of, oh, we're here to help. We're here to study and preserve and help people out. And it turns out they're a bunch of bastards. And considering the attack we had during Generation 5 from PETA, I've got a feeling the Aether Foundation are a little hit at organizations like that. The Aether Foundation are essentially people who pretend to be animal rights or like there to just study or there to just help, but they've got ulterior motives, which Black and White 2 was. Sorry, the Black and White evil team was as well, but I just think the Aether Foundation has done very well. Also Kukui. Kukui is my favorite professor. I love him. I love how he ends up being the champion, at least in the first game. I love just how... I just love his whole vibe. I love the fucking veiled, very thin-veiled thing with the masked... I forget the name of him, but the masked, like, luchador he pretends to be. Because he does, like, this Pokemon luchador, I forget what it's called now, Pokemon Battle Arena thing, where he wears a mask and he's like an Incineroar-themed luchador. His wife doesn't know, but his wife obviously has a massive crush on this character of his, but she doesn't know it's him. Meanwhile, his best friend just hands you the mask at one point. He's like, here, make sure you return this to Professor. His friend doesn't give a shit. And it was just like, it's a very thinly veiled secret that everyone except his wife knows, and I think that's very, very funny. It's just, also it's nice to have a professor that's in a relationship. Like the professor and his wife, who is also a professor, they just specialize in different subjects. That's awesome. The Pokemon Sun and Moon anime was actually really good. I think Generation 6, despite being where the game started going downhill, I think this is where the anime started going uphill. I'd say that Generation 6 of the anime onwards was when the Pokemon anime actually got good. But the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime was such a breath of fresh air. And Lycanroc, they finally made a full-on wolf Pokemon. And again, I've never been one to use like a pure rock type before. Typically, if I'm using a rock type, it's because it's got another type that makes it good, like steel or ground. Rock is kind of a shit type, like ice. So using Lycanroc and having Lycanroc be really fucking good, that's awesome. On top of that, there are like 2 different forms of Lycanroc, and they introduced the 3rd one later on. I love both of these forms. Like, I'm using the werewolf form currently in my current playthrough. The first time I used the basic wolf form. I love Lycanroc. That's another one. I can't believe I forgot to mention Lycanroc. But so many of the Pokemon from Sun and Moon I fucking love. The biggest downgrade though was online. The Pokemon fucking Sphere Circus thing was such a convoluted mess. They tried to essentially take the online features from X and Y and put it in this thing, but it was such an awkward, convoluted mess where you physically had to go somewhere and walk around the circle, and then you had to unlock certain things. It was like a weird mixture of that really awkward feature from one of the Black and White games, the weird like mall one where you'd unlock stuff, mixed with the X and Y kind of online stuff, and it just didn't work. It was terrible. But the biggest sin, with all the praise that I give Sun and Moon, the biggest sin of Sun and Moon is that it never shuts the fuck up. You're going to be playing this game for at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours before you get to choose your first starter. You are never let go. Ever. You can explore maybe a tiny little area, and then you'll go off the beaten path a little bit, and you'll get talked at for half an hour, and then they'll let you go, and they'll let you explore another little area, at which point you'll get talked at for half an hour. At no point throughout the entire run of the whole last game do they stop doing this. You have a tiny little area to explore, and then you get talked at. And then you have a tiny little area to explore, and then you get talked at. And they do this every single step throughout the entire fucking game. The entire fucking game. And they never let go of your hand. They never let you free. They never let you explore. And Sun and Moon is the first game to really do this. And this is going to get worse as the series goes on. But Sun and Moon is the first one to do this. And it is so bad. As much as I love this game, this is the one I'm playing through right now. I fucking love it. I'm really enjoying Sun and Moon. But it is so bad for how it never lets go of your hand. And also, like I've said, coming from X and Y and ORAS, it takes a massive step back in terms of its online features. And it's never been as good since in terms of that. Honestly, it just keeps getting worse. So I'm gonna put it here. I'm gonna put it here because Black and White, the flow is better. Like I've said, Black and White, the flow is better. That was the big praise I gave. These are just far more entertaining games to play. I love the Pokemon. I love the characters. I do enjoy the story. In fact, I think Sun and Moon probably has the best story of any of the Pokemon games at this point. I love the story. I love nearly everything about it. But the biggest issue with it is it never fucking lets you go at any goddamn point. It is so fucking bad at that. Now, Ultra Sun and Moon is really hard to kind of quantify because it is nearly exactly the same game. There is less added to this than like the prior ones. There's a lot of end game stuff added, including one of the hardest fights in the series, Ultra Necrozma, which is legitimately a really good fight. It is one of the hardest fights in the entire series of Pokemon, and it is legitimately a really good fight. We've got more Ultra Beasts, we've got more Mega Evolution. that you can do, including, I think, Lopunny. This was the one Lopunny was introduced, and I fucking love Mega Lopunny. The fucking fishnets kind of kickboxing bunny. I love Lopunny so much, so like I was super hyped for Mega Lopunny. But yeah, like Ultra Sun and Moon added a lot. It streamlined a lot of the gabbing. It made a lot of the kind of like the dialogue sequences easier. It did let go of your hand a little bit, and it's got a lot better endgame. So overall, I think it is the better game. There's also like new Pokemon as well, like the new version of Lycanroc. However, I think the original story is a lot better. They actually changed the story. They changed the story quite a bit, and I think the original version of the story is a lot better than the Ultra Sun and Moon version of the story. However, you're not playing the story, you're playing the game. And in general, Ultra Sun and Moon is a lot better because it doesn't hold your hand as much. It actually lets you explore a little bit more, and it's just generally a better crafted experience. But it's still not as good as Black and White. But I do think that Ultra Sun and Moon and Sun and Moon are very good, but it just has that one glaring flaw. Right. Before we go on to Pokemon Sword and Shield, let's talk about Pokemon Let's Go. We are returning to Kanto yet again. I have very mixed feelings about these games. Very mixed. We're shoving it here for now, but it's not staying here. I have very mixed feelings about these games. Where, essentially, I think the Let's Go should be a spin-off. I really want Pokemon Let's Go Togepi and Marill. You know, I want more Let's Go entries. I don't want it to be a mainline game. Like, I was kind of worried when this came out because Pokemon insisted that it wasn't a spin-off, it was a mainline game. I was really worried this was where it was going to go because Pokemon Go was huge. And Pokemon Go has had a serious effect on the design of the future entries. You can see it. There's more of an emphasis on catching Pokemon over and over again, even the same Pokemon repeatedly. And this kind of really was the game. Pokemon Let's Go kind of was like Let's Go if it was a real video game and not just a fucking cash grab. It's good. It is good. It's fun. It is the best looking Pokemon game visually, in terms of the 3D format. Pokemon Black and White 2 is the best Pokemon has ever looked, in my opinion, but Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is the best 3D game. Even now, even with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Pokemon Let's Go is the best looking fucking like Pokemon video game. It's very pretty. It's very pretty. The lighting is really good. The everything about it's it's a very, very pretty game. It controls really well as well. If you're in handheld mode. The problem I have with it is the bulk of the game is catching Pokemon. The same Pokemon. Over and over and over and over and over again. And the end game is more of that. So the biggest issue in Let's Go is honestly getting enough money to buy Pokeballs. You end up like repeating the gym leaders and the Elite Four over and over and over and over again just to get money in order to buy Pokeballs, because the bulk of the end game is just catching Pokemon over and 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 over again. And it's just a massive slog. It's a massive grind, and it's not worth it. The fucking Safari Zone was taken away and replaced with a connectivity for Pokemon Go, the mobile game. So if, like me, you don't bother with that fucking game, the Safari Zone is now useless. It's not a thing that exists. So I like it, but it's so limited. There's no, like, for example, Onyx can't evolve into Steelix. That's not a thing. It literally is just Gen 1. There's no held items. There's no abilities. It was a massive step back and a massive simplification in a lot of ways. However, every Pokemon you have, you can bring out the Pokeball. And you can ride on it, or you can swim on it, or you can fly on it, or it'll run behind you. And every single Pokemon in this game has its own unique animations, its own way of moving, and that's really cool. It is kind of like a mixture between Pokemon Yellow and Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver in terms of that following thing. Or basically, it is. It's the modern Pokemon Yellow. Because I forgot, Pokemon Yellow did that with Pikachu, didn't it? It's the modern Pokemon Yellow, essentially. And it is enjoyable. It's super chill, it's super relaxing, it's really fun, but once you kind of beat the game, there is only grind ahead of you. And the bulk of the experience is catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon. Back in my day, gotta catch them all was you've got to fill the Pokedex. Thanks to Pokemon Go, gotta catch them all means you have to capture every single living, breathing Pokemon in fucking existence. You have to capture all 17 million Rattata. You have to capture every single Pikachu that will ever and has ever existed. And it's just like, this is the most boring fucking thing in the world. I hate the way you catch Pokemon in this game. I do. I hate the way you catch Pokemon. I have to play this game in handheld mode because otherwise I need to fucking aim with my fucking motion controls, which have always been terrible. So in order to play this game, I have to play it handheld because then I can use the gyro to aim, and that's so much better than fucking motion controls. So I'm gonna put Let's Go here. It is better than Gen 1. It is better than the Gen 3, Gen 1 remake. I don't think it's as good as Silver. Yeah, I think as a fun, casual experience, like as a chill, casual experience, it's very fun. It's very good. It's very cute. There's a little bit of a customization thing that's quite nice. The partner Pokemon is great, especially as someone who's, again, Eevee is one of my favorite Pokemon. It used to be my favorite Pokemon until Hurlucha replaced it very recently. Eevee has been like my favorite Pokemon for most of my life. So yeah, Let's Go Eevee was a lot of fun for me. It's fun, it's good, it's cute, it's casual, but there really isn't a lot to it, and it's Gen 1 again. But I would be all over this series if they made this a spin-off series. So like I said, we had Let's Go Togepi and Marill. We had Let's Go fucking, I don't know, Pulsel and Minun, you know, something like that. You know, Let's Go Happiny and fucking, I forget the name of the Sudowoodo pre-evolution. But you get the idea, right? It would be kind of cool. I'd love to see a Let's Go, but obviously they're not going to do it for any of the others because Generation 1 is the only generation that matters to Game Freak. Both Pikachu and Eevee are major fucking mascots. They're not going to do the same with Marill and Togepi quite the same way, and especially not for future generations, so... But it's alright. Okay, Pokemon Sword and Shield. We're just going to put this here for now, but it is going to move. Pokemon Sword and Shield has some of the best music in the series. Pokemon Sword and Shield has some of the best new Pokemon in the series. Pokemon Sword and Shield has some of the best fucking gym leader designs and gym leader characterization in the series. The gym leaders do a lot in Pokemon Sword and Shield, more than like any other gym. They like really have a lot of personality. And that's kind of where my praise ends. I had a lot of fun with Sword and Shield. You know, the whole whoa, 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 that will never get old. I love that so much. The fact that it was based in my own country was a lot of fun. The fact that it was announced on my birthday kind of added some more hype and enjoyment for me. Frigging, Corviknight became one of my all-time favorite Pokemon and my favorite regional bird very, very quickly. But the problem with Sword and Shield is it is one of, well, it is the most soulless, rushed feeling, kind of by their numbers, mainline new generation Pokemon game to ever exist. It's not very good. The wild area was terrible. It fucked up the whole concept of Nuzlocke, which a lot of us enjoy playing and watching. And it's just... And of course there was Dexit, which, if you're like me, and you have favorite Pokemon that you've bred in past games, and shinies and things, like my Hurlucha, that has been in every single game with me since Generation 6, where I caught it in the Friend Safari, you might be shit out of luck. Because Sword and Shield was the first game in which pretty much every Pokemon that wasn't new to that region, or wasn't Pikachu, Eevee, Charizard, or Meowth, could be on the chopping block. Game Freak might one day decide that, I'm sorry, but your Pokemon isn't popular enough to be in this game. It's not Charizard, it's not Pikachu, it's not Eevee, it's not Meowth, so fuck off. Yeah. Now, I don't even think I don't think there's quite a few Pokemon like I've got in my bank that can't go in there. Even like Pokemon I've bred in the past to be like competitively viable, or just Pokemon I've bred to handle like the Pokemon towers and things like that in later games. I know I said that I've never done it, but I got heavy into breeding in Generation 6. I still never did it. It was one of those things where it's like I bred for shinies and I bred for IVs and I got really into breeding, but I never actually did the battle tower stuff. I just did the prep for it, which is weird. But I find battle after battle after battle after battle after battle after battle incredibly boring. The only time that was ever fun for me was the Pokemon Coliseum and Pokemon XD 100 battle kind of like mountain, because essentially the way I would do that is I would transfer Pokemon over from my playthroughs of Pokemon Emerald, Ruby, and Sapphire, and I could see them in 3D, which at that point in history was a very unique gimmick. And quite frankly, Pokemon Coliseum and XD still look better than the modern games because the animations are just better. They may not have the best, as good textures, but the animations are just better. They have more personality, which was the biggest issue with when Pokemon moved to 3D. Pokemon used to have so much personality in their sprites, and they've just lost so much of that. But yeah, it's like one day now, like I've been lucky. Hurlutra is popular enough to have been in every game since Pokemon X and Y, typically in the main Pokedex, catchable in the world. So I've not had issues with that. But plenty of people have, and there are other Pokemon that I've got that I've just not been able to send over because Game Freak has decided that they're not popular enough. You know, and when you see Pokemon like fucking Charizard, and it's always Gen 1 Pokemon as well, fucking Charizard, I think like the only Pokemon, for example, that got a Mega Evolution that wasn't a new generation Pokemon was Garbodor. Sorry, a Gigantamax was Garbodor. And I think it was the same thing in fucking other games as well. The only Pokemon in X and Y that really got Mega Evolutions were Pokemon that didn't need it. Why the fuck did Garchomp need bigger stats? Why did Lucario need better stats? What? I get it with Pinsir. You know, I get it with fucking Scizor, but fucking Garchomp? Blaziken? What? It was dumb. It was dumb. So, yeah, it's... The Gen 1 favoritism really starts to hit around the time of Pokemon X and Y. Because in X and Y, Charizard gets 2 Mega Evolutions, and on top of that, they're just more special than the new generation starters because they have Mega Evolutions and the new generation starters don't. In Pokemon Sun and Moon, the Pokemon that you rode on for your Fly-type HM, because they changed how that worked. Thank God, that was one of the best things about that game. They changed HMs into unlockable features rather than fucking around with your Pokemon. I am beyond happy they made that change. Well, what that did was they made Charizard the ride Pokemon for flying. Which isn't a big deal, but it's still, you know, a lot of the, I think most, if not all, of the Alolan Pokemon were Gen 1 as well. You know, you had Geodude, you had Vulpix, you had fucking Marowak, you had Rattata, you had Meowth and Persian. You know, it was, I don't know why specifically I mentioned Persian when I never mentioned the evolved forms of the others, but they were all Gen 1. And then fucking the next generation roll around, and the elite champion, his big thing is he uses a Charizard, which gets a Gigantamax evolution, and it's just like, okay. The first like major raid as well in Scarlet and Violet was Charizard again. I'm sick of Charizard. I'm really sick of Charizard. Can we remember that other Pokemon exist, please? Can we remember that other generations except one exist, please? Stop trying to get the Gen 1ers back. They're not coming back. They're busy playing the original generation over and over again. They do not care. Stop trying to get Gen 1ers back all the time. They are not Pokemon fans. They are Pokemon Red and Blue fans. That's it. Stop trying to get them back. We're sick of Gen 1, and we're sick of Charizard especially. Please, for the love of God. But it's just... Sword and Shield had amazing music, really good characterization, and some of the best new entries of Pokemon. Like, Sword and Shield, the new Sword and Shield Pokemon were very, very good. I love the Centipede, freaking Fire-type Pokemon. I love Corviknight. I adore Obstagoon. You know, I love Toxtricity. There's so many good ones. The fucking Rapidash as well. The Galarian Rapidash that looks like a fucking My Little Pony. The shiny of which being like mint green. Love it. Love that thing. It was in my team the first time I used it. Fucking Farfetch'd finally getting a good evolution with Surfetch'd. All over that. I had the shiny one. I got really lucky and I got a shiny one really easily in that game. Just randomly out of nowhere. Yeah, I love Cramorant, Grapploct. There are so many freaking Phalanx. Phalanx is fantastic. There are so many great Pokemon in that generation. So many amazing Pokemon in that generation. But the gameplay is terrible. In fact, all of these games considered, playing all of these recently, I'm putting it down here. Unlike Gen 4, I like it. But despite the fact that Generation 4 have so many good things, like in terms of their content, and this doesn't, and it's just the Dexit. That, do you know what? Actually, despite the fact that I like Pokemon Sword and Shield more than Generation 4, no, I've just convinced myself I cannot justify putting that ahead of Pokemon Gen 4 because at least Gen 4 could trade in old Pokemon. It's like, the whole Dexit thing is... I get it. You need the extra money to make high-quality animations. Meanwhile, a studio in which has struggled to get the money together to make their fucking game, and most of the team, nearly all of the team, because they had to change the fucking... They had to change the engine... Nearly all of the team needed to learn from a senior experienced team member how to use the new engine. And every single one of the pals in Pal World has unique animations and are fully animated. Meanwhile, the biggest IP in the world, from a company with more money than fucking God, can't even port over the Pokemon that has barely fucking changed since X and Y, with no new animations except walking around in the goddamn camp no one uses. You can't even be arsed doing that. I get it. There are hundreds upon hundreds, like there are over 10,000 Pokemon I think at this point, and near enough to it. I get it. Giving each one of these Pokemon completely fully customized animations is a big ask. I agree. But you cut most of the Pokedex. And you still don't do that. We still get the basic port models from X and Y. Have you seen Torkoal? I'm sorry, but there's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for it. At all. This was a soulless, bare-bones experience. The biggest thing as well, the voice acting. Pokemon never needed voice acting. It never did. There was no reason for it. It's an old-school JRPG-style game. You can read. Reading is fine. If you struggle to read, you really need to get an education. Or you're really young, which fair enough. But Pokemon Sword and Shield added animations of characters doing this. Moving their arms, moving their lips. but no voice came out of it. They're doing this. Nothing is coming out of the lips. It's weird. You're complaining about not being able to animate the Pokemon because there's too many of them, so you're going to cut them. Meanwhile, you go to the effort to animate lip movements and you don't give it voice acting? That's so fucking weird. That is so jarring to look at. Just do what you've done prior and what most JRPGs or life sim games or frigging visual novels do. Just put up a picture of a character with like mild different like facial expressions for different parts of the dialogue, and it would look better. It wouldn't be so fucking jarring. In fact, you do this at one point in Sword and Shield where the director is talking to I forget his name, but the champion, and it's a still image animation. You could have done that for the entire story. But you've moved 3D now, haven't you? Half the Pokemon have lost all their personality since moving to 3D, and now you're animating lip movements and animations, and they're like the most basic animations in the world, and despite the fact that you go to the effort to animate lip movements, you're not giving them voice acting? I'm sorry, I enjoyed Sword and Shield, but I am not gonna sit here and tell you it's a good game. It is the worst mainline game in the series. It is so half-assed. It is so soulless. It is so by the numbers. And as much as I can sit here and praise the art direction and praise the music direction, there's some of the highlights in every Pokemon game. The character designs have been fucking incredible for years. I'm talking about like the characters, the humans. The character designs are incredible. They have been for years. The music has been incredible for years, often taking cultural inspiration of where it come from. The music has been fucking incredible for years. Sword and Shield does not get credit for that because that is a staple of quality in every Pokemon game. It has nothing. It's a terrible game. It's the worst game in the series. I enjoyed it, but it's the worst game in the series. And I'm just going to put Brilliant Diamond and Pearl into fuck you. That's why this character category exists. I did not like Gen 4. However, every single remake that Pokemon has done so far has been better than the original. Every time. They've taken new generation mechanics from the original game, and they've given us a brand new experience with the old kind of like story and setting. Pokemon Oras is not the same as playing Pokemon like frigging Emerald or Ruby or Sapphire. You know, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver is not the same as playing Pokemon Gold and Silver. They're better. They're a lot better in nearly every way. Playing Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is like playing a Chinese Wish knockoff of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. They didn't even include the fucking Platinum editions. The characters look like a Wish knockoff. The movement is weird because the game is somewhat locked on a specific axis, but the assets they've used to make this game aren't. So you'll move your character and your character feels like it's on skates at all times, and they'll randomly veer off in different directions. It's weird. It's not made any changes to the original game whatsoever, except changing the underground into ways where you can get Pokemon that would otherwise be a bitch and a half to get. So you can get Togepi and Cypher, which you couldn't really get easily in the original game, or it would be a post-game thing, which is great. That's a great change, and that's all the praise I can give it. It's terrible. It controls like ass. The menu is terrible. It uses the original shit. It doesn't even use the Platinum editions. It is as basic and bare bones and cut and dry and copy and paste and lack of any form of... This game was made just to shut the fuck up people were going on about a Gen 4 remake. That's all. The only reason this exists is to shut people up. They were like, oh, we're sick of people going on about Gen 4 remakes, just shove one out there and shut them up. That's what this game is. This game is a fuck you to its fan base. I don't give a shit about Gen 4, but I was hoping that a remake would do what every other remake did and made a better game, and I could like Gen 4. I wanted to like this game. I want to like Gen 4. I want to say, I didn't like the originals, but the new ones are really good. But they're a giant fuck you to the fan base. How the hell can the single most popular generation collectively in the history of the series outside of Gen 1 get such a fucking shaft from the company? Are you serious? Gen 4 has so many die-hard fans. It was the first experience for so many people in the goddamn community, and you shit all over them. What the fuck is that? Nah, fuck you. Fuck you so much. That game is a massive fuck you to all of us. It was just shat out. Which is actually why I'm glad that the remake of Gen 5 isn't coming out just yet. Because Gen 5 is my second favorite generation. I fucking love Black and White. It is one of the best games in the fucking series. But how are they gonna remake it? Because there's two of them. Are we gonna get like Pokemon, I don't know, Darkest Black and Pokemon Brightest Light? And then are we gonna get Pokemon Darkest Bright 2 and or Lightest Dark 2 and Brightest Light and Darkest Light 2 or something like that? Are we gonna get 4 games? Are they gonna milk this for all it's worth? Are they gonna do Pokemon White but not fucking Pokemon White 2? Are they gonna do Pokemon White 2 but not Pokemon White? Like, how the fuck are they gonna do it? The fact is that Pokemon Black and White 2 are so good and so popular. At this point, they are the most popular games in the series. Phone. Sorry about that, just family. I've asked them to ring me back in a few minutes. But yeah, it was like Gen 5, I am so worried about the remakes because Pokemon right now are not doing great. They're kind of shitting out games, and they're shitting out games, I think, for a few reasons. Number one, they don't need to try because it's the biggest selling IP in the fucking world, and it doesn't matter what they do, idiots like me will buy it. It really is that simple. It'll sell regardless. Number two, these games have to come out in line with the trading card games, the general merchandise, the anime, the movies. They have to come in line with everything else. So they will never get enough time. Girls, will you calm the fuck down? Just because I got up doesn't mean we're going out. So they will never have enough time to make one of these games properly and polish it. It has got so bad that people are getting super excited and jumping up and down saying, oh my god, they're finally giving themselves enough time for Pokemon Legends AZ because they've given themselves a year. That is not a long time to make a game. And on top of that, they have shown us nothing. They didn't even show us concept art. They've just shown us a CGI trailer of the general concept of the game. No, sorry. They showed us a CGI trailer of Kalos, the city, the Lumio city. That's all they showed us. They didn't show us any gameplay. They didn't show us any concept art. They showed us nothing. They have fuck all to show us. Or what they do have to show us is really, really early, and they don't want to give the wrong impression, so they've not shown us. So they're giving themselves a year to develop a game either from scratch or from a really early standpoint. They'll probably use a lot of the assets from Pokemon Legend Arceus and just copy that over and throw in new skins of it. That's fine, I don't mind them doing that. So hopefully, because Legends Arceus exists, they're gonna have some form of base to work on. But I think people are being stupid by saying, oh my god, they're giving themselves time because they're giving themselves a year. That's nothing. That is nothing to make a big RPG. It's really not. Especially a 3D one. It's really not. It's gonna be bad. I'm just putting that out there. But people seem to love Legends Arceus because people will gobble up anything with the slightest semblance of mild action combat. So, yeah, it's like... But yeah, like, so, as I'm saying, they've not got enough time to develop these games properly because it has to go out with the rest of the other stuff. They don't need to develop a good game because people are going to buy it regardless. On top of that, Game Freak are getting sick of making Pokemon games. They've been making Pokemon games since the fucking 90s and they're sick of it. and they really want to get out of it. I don't know this for a fact, but this is really how things seem. Game Freak are fucking sick of making Pokemon. They're spread too thin. The teams are busy making like 20 odd fucking mobile like cash grabs and fucking shovelware games. They're making other games, like right now they're working on this horse racing game, which actually seems kind of neat. I might look into that one. The horse racing game kind of seems like fun. They're doing other stuff on top of this. They don't have enough time in general, and the entire team isn't working on it because they're too busy making mobile games and things. And lastly, I can't remember the last point now. Let's see. It has to be in line with everything. People will buy it regardless. They don't care anymore. I can't remember what the last point was, but anyway, it's just Pokemon games just... Oh, that was it. They moved to 3D. Game Freak really made amazing games when it was sprites. They made amazing, beautiful games. And with games like Live Alive, it's kind of crazy how, like, beautiful sprite work can be. Sprites can be gorgeous. And sprites will also age a lot slower than 3D. 3D ages a lot quicker. So 3D will look bad sooner than sprites will. A lot of these old games, the sprite games, still look good to this day. A lot of the 3DS games really don't, because they've moved 3D. And I don't think Game Freak really has the skills to do this. They just don't. So I think this is a mixture of lack of effort, lack of care, lack of skill, lack of time, and lack of need. And it's just piled on to basically Game Freak is going downhill. Thankfully, we've got games coming out like Pal Worlds, like Koromon, like Nexamon, like Cassette Beasts, like Disc Creatures. There's a bunch of different monster tames, like Dragon Quest Monsters, like the Digimon games. There's a bunch of monster tamers out now that are filling in for Pokemon, because people are getting sick of Pokemon, but Pokemon is a really unique kind of experience and people want to scratch that itch. So thankfully there are a bunch of monster tamers coming out now that are giving people a better quality version of that itch to scratch. So yeah, moving on. I do not like Legends Arceus. Legends Arceus is a lot like Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu and Eevee. It is just catch a Pokemon, 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 catch a Pokemon. Walk around a big, open, barren, empty world with just Pokemon in it. These big hub-based open areas do not reward exploration whatsoever. You'll get some extra resources and that's about it. The entire point of the game is catch, 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 catch every single Pokemon in existence. Not fill up the Pokedex and catch one of each type. No, every single one. You want to catch these Pokemon like Ash catch those Tauros. You want the entire fucking herd. You want their family. You want their ancestor. You want their future children of every single kind of Pokemon to exist. Catch, 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 catch. The only reason people like this game, as far as I'm concerned, is because they are so fucking desperate for a more action-focused Pokemon game. And this game had mild action mechanics. And that was enough for people, because a lot of people are quite frankly stupid, and they think that any game that is turn-based is archaic. Turn-based isn't archaic. Turn-based is just another way to do combat. There are many times of turn-based. Now, I'll admit, Pokemon turn-based is extremely bogged down. We don't need to hear the effects of Intimidate on every single Pokemon in the combat individually. We don't need to hear that fucking Earthquake doesn't affect, like, Flygon every single time it goes off. We know it has Levitate. We know it doesn't affect us. We don't need to see it pop up every single time. The Pokemon combat system is incredibly bogged down by repetitive, useless information that is delivered on an individual basis for every single Pokemon. This is probably also why they avoid double battles, typically speaking, as much as possible, because it just adds to the level of bogged down. So I understand, if this is the only turn-based experience somebody has ever had, I understand people being put off by turn-based, because Pokemon does it kind of in a very sluggish, needlessly convoluted, well, needlessly bogged down way. However, I am very, very, very fucking sick of JRPGs going action. We are losing so many amazing turn-based games because everything is turning into a turn brain off bash buttons action experience. I'm sick of it. Or they do these horrible awkward hybrid systems where it's both action and turn-based at the same time and they're always awkward as hell. Stop. Legends Arceus is just running around catching Pokemon. That's all you do. It is Pokemon Go if it was an actual video game. It is boring as shit, and the only reason people like it is because they are so fucking desperate. So desperate for some more action in their Pokemon games. And when we've got games like Persona 5, and like Bravely Default and Honkai Star Rail, in which the turn-based combat is so hype feeling, it really puts into perspective yet another way Pokemon is lacking. So yeah, again, cassette beast turn-based. The music and the merging systems make that game so hype. We don't need all this same convoluted information over and over again. And in fact, cassette beast does some of that itself. So, you know, it's guilty of it as well. But it's not as bad as Pokemon. So I get it, but for me, I hate this game. I hate it. I never even I got bored and burned out from it so much. I'm aware of the story. I do like how you can add Pokemon to the village and things, but I hate it. And I know I'm in the minority. I like the new Pokemon. Ursalune is cool. The like Cleavor is cool, but I just hate it. I think it's an unbelievably boring experience. Catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon, catch Pokemon. Rattata, 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 rattata. Ponyta, 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 ponyta. Pikachu, Pikachu, Pikachu. How is that entertaining? Like, look, I've got some keys. I'm jingling some keys in your face. Are you entertained? Are you? I don't get it. I don't get it. It's super popular, but I don't get it. Finally, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. This is the hardest one because if it had two things, I'd put it here. I'd put it as the best Pokemon game ever. However, because it doesn't have those things, I'm putting it here, which is still going to be too high for a lot of people. What Scarlet and Violet does well, it does really well. What Scarlet and Violet does wrong, bog it down so much. It is another example of them animating lip movement without them adding voice acting, which is just so fucking weird. And there are people online that have done fan-made voice acting that has elevated this game so much. It's just better with voice acting because you're animating lip movement. If you're not gonna give people voice acting, why the fuck are you animating lip movement? It's so weird. On top of that, the bugs and performance was inexcusable. In fact, in the years it's been out, they've not fixed any of that. And the new piece of DLC is even worse than the original. I never crashed. I had bugs, but I never crashed. I never had any issues. In fact, the majority of the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet issues you'll experience when you go online and you co-op with other people. That's where all the issues come into it. Most of the bugs and whatnot, or the crashes, or the bad frame rate, really is in co-op, but it is in single player. And the only time I crashed in this game, it happened twice, was in the new DLC, which really pushes the online features, because if you want to grind the new points from the side quest system to unlock all the extra things like the starter Pokemon, it's a lot better to do it as a group. In fact, to get some of the specific legendary Pokemon, you have to do it online as part of a group. Otherwise, you can't do it. It just doesn't show up. So, in the worst performing bit of content in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it forces you into multiplayer, which is the part of the game that really accentuates the bugs and performance issues. Yikes. What Scarlet and Violet does well is the fact that, unlike the wild area for Sword and Shield, the wild area from this one is actually kind of fun. I really like the raids. Going into different raids is quite fun. However, the big event kind of like mightiest raids are not worth it. I've done one. I've done the Charizard one because it was the first one to pop up, but I've not done any since, because you have to kind of breed very specific Pokemon. Because these Pokemon, for example, the new one coming up is going to be a Venusaur with a ground type Terra, meaning you're gonna have to make a Pokemon that hits hard and is tanky enough, has super effective moves against ground types, but also isn't weak to any of the moves Venusaur might have, because they're not stupid. They put in coverage so you have to basically maybe breed, but at the very least EV train specific Pokemon and give it specific movesets in order to take these on. And they've actually removed quite a few of the conveniences from the prior games in order to do this. So there's still more conveniences than other games. They kind of traded conveniences around, and these new conveniences are more convoluted and they cost more in-game money. So it's not as good anymore, but it still takes a lot of time. There's no super training anymore, so the only way to get them is to give them berries or shit, which again takes time to get, or you do it the old-fashioned way, which is typically how I choose to do it. And it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. I'll do it if they ever bring out a Pokemon I fucking love, like the Decidueye. They might have done that already. I don't know. I've not played it every day since it's been out. But it's just not worth the effort. It's just not. And the raids are just, everyone brings the same Pokemon. Everyone brings Iron Hands to every fight. Even if you're against a fucking Charizard that knows fire type moves, that's going to one-shot the thing. Because of how powerful it is, they'll bring it in every fight, and then it'll die every fucking round, but they'll do it every time anyway because people are stupid. The mightiest big raids are really bad. They're so overtuned. They're such a pain in the ass to fucking train for. They're not worth it. But the actual general raids are a lot better than Sword and Shield. They're quite entertaining, and I like them as part of the general exploration of the game. It's the end game ones that kind of annoy me. I love the characters. I love the stories of the characters. In fact, I'm going to go out and say Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has the best story in any Pokemon game, which is partly why it's as high as it is. I love Miraidon and Koraidon. I like the fact that we essentially start off with a legendary that is part of our party, it's part of our group, but we don't actually use it in combat. It makes Koraidon and Miraidon feel extremely special, and I like them a lot. They're some of my favorite legendary Pokemon, and I have never at any point used them in combat outside of the moments you've been forced to, because they're legendaries, and I don't like losing legendaries in combat, but I love having them by my side as I'm exploring this area. It's one of the best ways they've done legendaries. I also really like Ogerpon, because Ogerpon doesn't look like your typical legendary. It's very, very cute. I've got it in my main team at the moment. I really like Ogerpon. It's become one of my favorite Pokemon very, very quickly. The story attached to Ogerpon is very, very cute. The story attached to Kieran and his struggles with, you know, inequity and whatnot, and the kind of way he goes through his teenage angst period in the DLC. Really good story. I like the fact that he throws a fucking Master Ball at one of the legendary Pokemon before you can get it, because the last time you both saw a legendary Pokemon, you took it from him. Because that legendary Pokemon chose you, and this new legendary Pokemon was also going to choose you, so he's like, fuck that, that's not going to happen, and he chucks a Master Ball at it. You never see other characters use other type of Pokeballs other than fucking Pokeballs themselves. That's cool. I love the story, I love the characters. There is the part with the dog that almost made me fucking cry. I love Nemona. Nemona's great. The fact that she practices combat so much that she's actually strained her wrist from all the Pokeballs she throws over and over and over again. That's such good character design. She's such a good character. I like the fact that she takes no for an answer when you beat the Elite Four and you're like, no, we're not rivals. No, we're not rivals. No. And she's like, we're rivals, yeah? Rivals, yeah? Rivals, yeah? Yeah, we're rivals. Oh, I love her. She's one of the best characters they've ever made in the series. The designs are top-notch as per usual. I love a lot of the new Pokemon as per usual. And overall, Scarlet and Violet is one of the most fun games to replay because the fact that you can go most different places, at least to find the Pokemon, the exploration elements of it, and again, like, because the way this game is designed, I am never going to learn where all the Pokemon are. It's not like the old games where I know where to go to get what Pokemon I want. I'm never going to learn where they all are. And looking them up online is so difficult because the map is so huge and the names of specific areas are so complicated that looking them up is a pain in the ass anyway. So it really does promote just exploring and catching what you find. And I really like that. And it does reward going off the beaten track. If you go off the beaten track, you're going to get yourself TMs, you're going to get yourself useful items, you're going to find Pokemon like routes that you're not going to find just by going down the main road. You can get routes, one of the best Pokemon in every game it's in, really early on, but you have to explore. If you stick to the beaten track, you're not going to find it. You're going to have to explore. So unlike Legends Arceus, it rewards exploration. I really like this game. I do. I think if this game was polished properly, and if this game had voice acting, it would without question be not only peak Pokemon, but the best game in the series. And because its strengths are so high, that's why I rank it so high, because Scarlet and Violet is legitimately really good. It's just held by its bugs, which, in my opinion, in my experience, I never experienced a lot of. However, the performance is really bad, and there's no excuse for it. And I'm so sick of people saying, oh, but the Switch isn't powerful, the Switch isn't powerful. Bitch, have you seen Legend of Zelda? Have you played games on the Switch? Legend of Zelda, Mario, like so many of Nintendo's mainline games are fucking gorgeous. They're fucking gorgeous. Say what, I don't like Legends Arceus, but Legends Arceus also plays so much better than Scarlet and Violet. It doesn't matter that the Switch isn't the most powerful uber fucking system in the world. Newsflash, neither are the major fucking consoles, and half the games released on the new PlayStation or the new Xbox, whichever one they are, half of these games, they lie to you in trailers. They run really fucking badly because they focus first on graphics and they don't give a fuck about optimization. Have you seen the gigabyte install of most games right now? 80 odd gigabytes for a basic install of the game because nobody bothers to fucking optimize games anymore. They don't bother. So game installs are like 80 fucking gigabytes and whatnot. Like, it's got nothing to do with the Switch. None of these consoles, as a PC gamer, none of these consoles from day one will hold a candle to PC. And even then, PC games on the best system in the fucking world, the highest fucking graphics card, the best everything, will run like complete ass if it's not optimized properly. And that's the problem with Scarlet and Violet. They have not polished it. It has not been optimized. It has not had bug fixes because they need to shove it out with everything else. Every Pokemon game is a beta for the next at this point because it needs to just be shoved out as quickly as possible to be in line with the anime and the movies and the cards and the merchandise and everything, because it's a big money making machine and that's all it's about. It's about money, 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 money. So it's not the Switch. The Switch can have incredible looking games. The mainline Nintendo games speak volumes. Just because the Switch isn't the most powerful game system in the world doesn't mean it can't run games that run well. There's no excuse for Scarlet and Violet. It was just rushed out. And instead of developing time in order to fix it, they just made DLC to sell you. But, all that aside, what it does well, it does so well that it is one of the best games in the series. It really is. Even aside from the bugs. It's kind of like how Morrowind and Oblivion and Skyrim are incredibly buggy messes that modders need to fix in order to make these games functional. Like, every Bethesda game has an unofficial patch that does a better job than anything they will ever do in a quarter of the time. But we all love those games, or at least most of us. People love Morrowind, people love Oblivion, people love Skyrim. People will play these games over and over and over and over and over and over again for thousands of hours. Despite the fact that they're a buggy mess, because what they do well, they do really well. And it's the same thing with Scarlet and Violet. It just needs voice acting, and it just needs polishing. And it would, with that, it would be here. But as it stands, it's here. So, if you are brand new to Pokemon, and you have a time machine, so you can go back to the era in which DS games were not retardedly overpriced. Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Pokemon Black and White 2, and Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, all without question the best games in the series. Despite the fact that all three of these have problems. ORAS doesn't have a battle tower or endgame. Heart Gold and Soul Silver has the same problems as the original, where most of the new cool Pokemon can only be found post-game. And Black and White 2, I honestly can't think of anything bad off the top of my head. I just don't think overall the features are as good as they are in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Because I love the Walker, I love the fucking Pokemon Athlon thing, whatever it's called. I love the fact that the Pokemon follow you, which is honestly one of the major reasons this is first and that one is second, because the Pokemon follow you and it's so cute and it makes you bond with them so much. Oh, one thing I didn't mention when talking about Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you meet a photographer that will take a picture of you and your team, and you'll meet him through various points throughout your journey. And it's really, really cool looking back at the pictures and seeing how your team literally changed and evolved as your adventure went on. You end up with like a little scrapbook of photography where you're like, oh, that was when I had a Totodile, and oh, this is when my Totodile was a full-on Feraligatr. No, it's like a memory book, and it's super cute. And again, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver is an adventure. It's a journey that you play a little bit of every day as part of your normal routine, and it's really what sets that game apart from everything else. The other ones are RPGs that you play and eventually put down. Heart Gold and Soul Silver is one that you can play like Animal Crossing, and it's really what sets it apart on top of all the other extra features. But there are my opinions. So essentially, I think what this is boiled down to is these are the peak games, these are the best games Pokemon has ever made. These are games that I think the pros outweigh the cons, because the pros are so good that they outweigh the cons, and they really elevate them beyond anything else. These are the games that I fucking love. The only reason they're here is because they're old and they don't have the features of modern games, or they have problems that kind of outweigh the positives, unfortunately. Then we got games that I really like, but there are just better ones that tell the same story. And then we've got ones that I think, yeah, like these are just Gen 1 games, and Gen 1 I'm kind of tired of at this point. The first games in the series, there is something truly magical about them that cannot be replicated, but that magic is found in Gen 2, to be honest, which is just better games. And then we got the games that I either don't like, or the ones that I just can't justify putting any higher. Because like Sword and Shield is overall pretty bad. It just has a few things that I can praise about it, which is more than I can say for Arceus. Again, I like the new Pokemon in Arceus. I like how you build up the village, the town in Arceus. It's really cool as time goes on. You see you see the Pokemon that you have chosen to bring to the town. I like that. That's neat. And then there's just this game, which is a massive fuck you to the fucking fan base. Like, it's so lazy. It legitimately pisses me off, even though I'm not a fan of Gen 4. It pisses me off because I wanted to like Gen 4, and that was a massive disappointment. And the major reason why, as much as I love Gen 5, I don't have a lot of faith in the Gen 5 remakes. I think we're going to get ass again. But we'll see. But the biggest takeaway is, I love Pokemon. I've been playing it a lot of last year, and I've been playing it pretty much all of this year. I love it so much. I'm never going to stop loving it. But there might come a time where I stop buying the games, and I just play the old games. Thankfully, I have the GameCube where I can play the Game Boy Color and Advance series. I'm lucky enough to have that. Most people don't. So, yeah. But anyway, this has been a long-ass video. I haven't taken the dogs out yet. I really should. It's almost 5 o'clock. I hope you guys have had fun and enjoyed me ranting. I've really enjoyed doing this. I've been wanting to put this together for a little while now, but this is, as of the 1st of March 2024, my overall take on the series at large. Freaking Coliseum isn't in here, like, not Coliseum, Stadium isn't in here, and that 1-1 for the Wii isn't on here. They would both be lower, but they would. I put the one for the Wii about here. I forget what it was called. I put the one for the Wii about here, and I put the fucking 64 one like down here behind the mainline Pokemon games. But yeah. Anyway, bye for now. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for wasting a long time with me.